Hello, everyone. Welcome to Trade Movies Podcast. I have a very special guest today. I'm talking to Tad Griffith, who is a legendary stuntman. My words, not his words, but my words and many, many other people's words. You probably know his work from The Mask of Zorro, which you might have seen on my channel, Cowboys and Aliens, and Wild Wild West, and probably about 800 other things. I don't know if it's 800, but it's quite a bit if you go into the IMDb for him. He is the owner of, and correct me if I'm wrong here, a Tad West Stage Productions.
Yeah, a Tad Western production company. Yes, sir.
Gotcha.
Yes.
So yeah, Tad, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for so much. I really appreciated your tribute to the Mask of Zorro. I thought that it was insightful, and you'd done your research. And I mean, I had it. I think I had it all over my TikTok or whatever, my social media within minutes of when you put it out. So it got my attention, and I really, really enjoyed the way the whole curve of the story. I thought you did a great job. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that was one of my, this is big for me because that was legitimately one of my favorite movies as a kid, still to this day. Every couple years I watch them like, man, how is this not known as like, and I mean, to me and a lot of others, I think it's known as one of the best action movies of all time, or the 90s, but certainly like when I see lists, I don't necessarily see it up with like The Matrix or Die Hard or whatever, but to me it's in that category of like, I can't find a thing wrong with it, all the way down to every one of the stunts is, I think, as impressive as anything else you'll see. And that was your first movie, right? In Hollywood?
Or was it was my first real movie in Hollywood.
First real movie.
I had done a couple of miniseries and a few commercials, and I'd never really been paid correctly. I had always been kind of like paid as an extra and underpaid. And I done I did Dream West and Gambler 1 and 2, and it was really cool. I loved doing it, but I said, "Wow, this is fun, but I have to go make a living." So I wasn't paid appropriately, and that happens a lot in Hollywood when you're green and you don't know any better,
Yeah, absolutely. One interesting thing you were saying off camera before we started was talking about doing a stunt on Cowboys and Aliens, and it was you were saying that to make it safe, you had to sort of go like frame by frame, like sort of in the rehearsals to make sure, because it was like a timing of half a second. So could you walk through that for the audience? Like when you're approaching a stunt like Cowboys and Aliens, is it a thing of like to make these things as safe as possible? It's just obsession, obsession, obsession?
If you're good. Yes. So you can, and there's an old cowboy term, just talk your leg and let gravity take over. I'm not from that school. I'm not from that school at all. Because as a kid in trick riding and stuff, I rehearsed hours every day just to get to where I had the power of recovery. And I think my past life in trick riding and Roman riding and performing rodeos and dinner theaters for 8,000 performances prepared me for that power of recovery. That's something that you have to grow into. In other words, some people, I guess, maybe naturally have it, but I know that that's what kept me alive during my stunt career so far, is just having the power of recovery and being able to take whatever comes at me and make the proper adjustments, because everything slows down. Like the people say, when you're almost ready to die, it slows down. Well, it has to be the same way when you do stunts, and you can do that two ways: doing a lot of different stunts, or just having done specific things over and over until it's like when you ride bulls, you ride 100 bulls before you ever see their head. You don't just see a blur to begin with. So on Cowboys and Aliens, the thing that was funny was it was the first major stunt of the movie. I designed wrecking wagons, and I wreck a lot of wagons. For my live shows, I had that background. But on this particular thing, they'd already established a wagon that didn't have any suspension. And I didn't have my horses, and we were trying to work out the disconnect system, and it was not going well. Like 10 days in, it still wasn't working, and everyone was just throwing more big ideas of how it was just getting more complicated. Everything, it was just getting to be too many things had to go right. So we wound up sending for the release mechanism on my own homemade wagon. It arrived, we put it in, but just to step through, I was watching. Originally, they put there's a flipper arm that comes down and hits the ground, but they had put special effects to put it in forward. So instead of being progressive, it was just instant. The wagon went from going straight to just already 3/4 flipped over. And I was watching it frame by frame, realized there's no way I could get out of the wagon fast enough and it wouldn't just eject me into the top of the saloon, because it's a spring seat. There just wasn't time.
Yeah.
So I asked them, is there any way to make this more progressive? And they said, oh, well, not now, because we put the thing in. I go, And then wait a minute, we could put like a foot on it, like a little slider foot, and it won't be so. I said, perfect. And then we watched it frame by frame again, and I saw that I had the half a second I needed to get out before it flipped. So anyway, that's the kind of thing you have to know what to look for. You have to
Yeah.
know what the risks are, and you had to have been there. I broke my arm in Fort Worth with my own wrecking wagon because the guy forgot to pull the pins out for rehearsal, and it ran over me and broke my arm. So I remember this really good because I did 30 performances with a broken arm. So it's a good.
That's like your dad,
It's
right? That was your dad was famous for that,
mm,
correct?
yeah. It was ingrained in your memory when you had to do 30 performances with it broke, and
Yeah.
had to have it fixed after. But anyway, what the sequence exactly the way it worked, so that the people that love horses will understand. I wanted the first thing that happens is you step on a dimmer switch, contact switch, and the horses are released from the coach, which means I have to release the lines to let them separate. And then as they're separating, about 3 inches after they separate from the wagon, a brake switch, electric brake switch is pulled out, which activates the explosions and also the hydraulic arm that would down hit the ground that flipped the wagon. So as the horses are released and the explosions go off and I feel the horses are gone, then I have to re-grab the horses for them to jerk me out of the wagon. So if you watch that
Wow.
sequence in slow motion, you'll see I stayed with the horses all the way till I hit the ground, just to make sure I was clear of the wagon so it wouldn't roll over me. So those are the kind of details that go into the creation of the stunt. And it was a one-time deal.
Yeah.
The funny thing about is it was 3 o'clock in the morning. They'd released all the special effects guys for the night that knew how to do it. And at the last minute, they decided at 4 o'clock before the sun comes up, let's try it. And so we were loading it with guys who had never done it. It was a lot of pressure. And I remember my best friend, he comes over and goes, "Hey, this is the first major stunt of the thing, so make sure it works." I go, "Why wouldn't you?" "Yeah, perfect,
Yeah.
thanks." Anyway, it all worked out. And that's when you know that when you do all the little things right all the time, when you do your best all the time, it always comes back and serves you, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely. That's an interesting thing. I had started. I grew up playing ice hockey, and that was like, uh, just ice hockey. Like I felt like I've had decent balance. I say this, and then I know that whenever I get on a horse, this is shocking, but I've probably the most diametrically opposite in terms of horse experience, because I might have told you when we were talking before that I've only ever been on a camel, not a horse. It's just something I grew up just yeah. But I've always wanted to, because I've heard balance is good, and I grew up playing hockey and hiking a lot. Just like
Yeah.
that was sort of my parents took me on these hiking trips when I was 3 through like these rocky paths and everything. But when I started coaching, so I'd like always kind of grew up like with that. But when I started coaching ice hockey, I volunteer coached like a 12 and under team a couple years ago for like a friend who runs the local program. And then I was like, oh, I don't know how to teach skating. It's like I've always just skated, but I don't know how to like teach it. And the
Yeah.
things that you have to do with sort of your foot like in the moment they reminded me a lot of something that you talked about in this. There's a great article that Tad did with Red Bull, and one of the things that you said, I think you were talking about some of the pioneering stuff that your dad did, and one of the things I thought was really fascinating was that I think it's use the power of the horse to send you above the horse, and getting back on will take care of itself. So I was curious about like when you're doing the stunt riding. I guess it's maybe a not to give you a two-parter question, but like it seems like you're using the horse's momentum in stride to sort of lift you up as you're doing certain things. And then in terms of timing, do you find that you relate that work to like doing other stunt work, like gotta hit here, and does that sense of like
Yeah.
timing really help you like across sort of disciplines?
Wow. You just hit on so many specific things that
Sorry.
you could write a book on everything that you just asked me. So let me go back to the beginning, which was my father. He was extremely unique, whether if he were in hockey or whether he were, in ballet or whatever. He was the one that actually reinvented how to do it, and then was never defeated from the time he was 9 in this country. Went to London when he was 21 and won against 48 other countries, 30 of which withdrew from the competition when they saw him practice and then he never lost a competition ever. And then he was also able to teach it. And those two things are almost incredibly never in the same human.
Yeah.
A lot of people can teach, can't do. A lot of people can do, can't teach. But to reinvent how it's done, to rethink how it's done, and it could have been just simply by accidentally getting a lot of lift one time.
Hmm.
and then going back and being able to understand how that happened, because the timing of a horse is everything.
Hmm.
I say that you control the speed of the horse, they control the cadence and they control the dance. His philosophy was to go up, not try to get on. Everyone you see in any other form of trick riding, they jump off a horse, they try to get back on the horse. That's totally reasonable. That's common sense. He learned to go above his horse and
Hmm.
then float. So we trick ride above our horses. If you see the pictures of my kid, they fly where they want to be next. So we've learned to use the power of a 1,000-pound animal to throw us to where we want to be next, because we don't have the fear of turning our head, because that's another thing that's a big fear of everyone. They want to get almost to the spot they want to go to, and then
Hmm.
they'll turn their head.
Hmm.
Whereas we know to do a pirouette or to get to where we want to go, must turn our head first. And so that's the number one thing, is timing and counting. So we count every stride. And the next thing is to be able to turn our head. So even to save yourself, if you're falling off a horse, you've got to turn your head the last second to get to your back, because your back can
Hmm.
take a lot more front force than your face can.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Like a stage fall.
basically, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And then the other thing was, we even count the leads. So a horse runs on a diagonal. When they're running straight, they either skip to the left or skip to the right, just to give you a basic layman's term of what's going on. So if they're skipping to the left, that's the side you want them on. If you're going to fall off the left side, jump to a train, jump to somebody on another horse, you need them under you.
Hmm.
And then if you feel them at the last second, switch and go to the other skip to the other side, then you must realize you've got to put twice as much energy into it from yourself to
Hmm.
get to the same place you got last time. So when I was jumping to the leaders of a runaway stagecoach on American Outlaws, I had to go 7 times. One time the horse switched leads, and if you miss the whole stagecoach and a lot of horses run over you. So I knew instantly that horse had switched leads, because he had to jump a bush or something, avoid something. So I knew I had to put twice as much input into it.
Hmm.
And when it comes to the timing, they say riders of horses make great drivers of cars and stuff, because we already kind of understand how to intersect with things.
Hmm.
And because we ride organically, every stride's about 12 feet.
Yeah.
So I do count my strides out, how many feet I need to get shot so I can take the initial hit. Whether it's a real hit or just a visual effects hit, I have to open up and give them a space to put it. And then I come back to either fall toward camera or away from camera. But just for instance, if I was shooting over an actor's shoulder and I'm running directly at him, and they ask me, where do we need the actor to shoot you for you to land on this mark? I can already tell you it's between 36 and 42 feet, depending upon the take I take. So
Hmm.
I can but I've seen so many times, because of my background, I understand that, and that's how we develop these sequences. And then I'd also ask the director if he wants a forward ground wipe or a background wipe, because they start adding that stuff after you've already fallen off several times.
Hmm.
Oh, it'd be really cool if somebody ran through right after that, But I just kind of like dissect that as a coordinator. I go ahead and give them all those. I give them all those options before we shoot the guy falling off the horse,
Yeah.
just so that we don't have to go back and make him do those hard falls. And I do the same thing with animals too. I make sure that we limit the number of takes we have to do to make sure it's as humane as possible. Not that it's not
Okay.
humane, but I'm just saying, the law of averages is a real thing.
Yeah.
You only get so many chances of something, so I want to make sure we don't ask for too much.
Yeah. Humane for the riders too. I mean, you guys have to take all the bumps and everything else. So, to go into your family history. So you were talking about your dad a bit. So you are I guess a third generation.
Third
Yeah,
generation,
third generation, because it was your dad had trained your mom, and your mom and you worked together for 30 years or so, and then also your aunt Toots as
Yeah,
well.
that she would have been my step grandmother.
Step
Toots
grandmother.
was
I'm
my
sorry.
step
Yeah.
grandmother. Yeah, that's fine. Toots, she was known as the smallest cowgirl champion, and also she was also a really good trick rider as well. My grandfather was not a great trick rider. He did like all the events. He was a producer of early Wild West shows, so
Mm.
he would clown and then ride this and then trick ride. And they used to Roman race. My dad would Roman race him with his ponies, and he'd always win. And it was funny because my grandfather died when my dad was 12. And then my dad took like 5 or 6 years off from horses completely, because it wasn't back in that world. And then he went to Fort Worth when he was 17, had to get permission from his grandparents. And then he entered the bull riding and won the bull riding. and that started his rodeo career back up, so he could buy horses and stuff again. So
Oh wow.
that's kind of how it worked. Yeah, pretty wild. But
Is there?
those ponies of his went to to Will Rogers for his
Oh,
kids.
cool.
So that was
Yeah,
really cool.
that's
Yeah.
really cool. Is there when you said your dad when you were telling the anecdote of he went to this competition in the world championships in London, and there were people from many other countries, and they got intimidated by him because of how good he was. Is there still like an international sort of trick riding circuit? Because when I was reading about some of the history and some materials on your website, by the way, definitely check out Tad's website, which I'll link in the description of the episode and on any clip that I reference this. It's great. He's got a great history of his family on there. But I was curious in terms of the origins of trick rider in going up to modern day. It seemed like there was, there's used to be a lot of like Cossack, like Russian trick riding doing it, and so there was this big tradition, at least in the past, of many other countries doing it as well. Is that still hold?
Absolutely. I guess I'll have to add a couple of different pieces. When my dad went over there, the reason why he was able to compete and win against those other countries and those, because Cossacks were the most famous.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's the Georgians. The first time American cowboys or the public saw that kind of trick riding, that specialized was the Georgian riders. They called them Russians because everybody knew where Russia was. But they performed at the Buffalo Bill Wild West show. There had been cowboys and cowgirls that had done some stuff on, I'm sure, fooling around on horses before. They'd never done it to that extreme. Once they saw the Russian Cossacks, they said, holy cow. So that's where American style trick riding kind of began. But what we did was we took our saddles, which are more like the roping saddles, from the vaquero that has the back cinch, so it's much more stable. And we were able to perform all kinds of tricks off the back of the saddle that the Cossacks don't do. So that also distinguished us. So when we do international competition in the future, because we're now presently, I've already done like 9 North American championships before. I had to write all the criteria and, develop the competitions from, I have a direct link to the original ones. And I'll get back to that in a second, but we will have those again. I think that we'll have to do a scoring system for the European style of trick riding, and then there'll be an American style trick riding. I don't think you can really compare the two. I mean, there'll be the best Russian, the best Eastern or, European style trick rider, and there'll be the best American. And I'm not saying they couldn't compete in each other's divisions doing their tricks. I'm just saying it's just a totally different style. It's like open wheel and NASCAR.
Yeah.
It's both racing a car, but it's just enough different because it's just we have different tools and different tricks that we perform.
Yeah.
But the thing that distinguished my dad from them was the air time, in which it's like the Air Jordan. He was the Air Jordan. He could go up and stall above his horse, and as fast as they could go and as fast as they could do it, they couldn't. Didn't have the air time that he had because they didn't. They jump off and have the horse jerk them to where they want to be next. Whereas my dad would come off and he would keep his body away from the horse, so none of his momentum would be scuffed off. So he'd hit the ground, stay away from him, and that way he would explode up into a handstand above him.
Yeah.
And so if you turn in at all, try to get on, it scuffs off that momentum, and you get on quick. You just don't have that kind of air time.
Yeah.
And that's what distinguished his style from everyone else's. And it was too obvious not to score. Because believe me, they didn't want to score an American Cowboy to win the thing. I'm sure it was a little bit biased, as you can imagine. But anyway, that's kind of it was born from the Buffalo Bill Wild West shows and the Georgian Cossack riders that came over, and just that show was such a huge hit at that time that trick riding really took off. It really, really just that's where it happened.
That's interesting. Is the Russian style is that a descendant, or is it even a different thing? Just as a history lover, nerd, whatever. I think of the Mongols, right? Like they were to some extent. Maybe you could say that elements of trick riding, or at least the insane adeptness with the horse, was that was their sort of military super. That was their super weapon, right? With the horse archers.
It was their special forces. It was their Navy SEAL team. They would send them in, hanging on the side, and they would demonstrate what they could do. It was their elite. That's the most elite cavalry. And as we know through history, one cavalry rider is worth 4 foot soldiers. I mean, this is back to Roman times. If you've ever read the great book, those who are about to die, salute you. And I learned a few things, crowd psychology. It's all about entertainment in the Roman games. But one of the things I learned about it was the sincerest form of applause is a great gasp. And I've always been enamored with that because whether I was in a live show or in a movie, that's still what we're going for, is that great guess,
Oh yeah.
because you steal it from the audience, you don't earn it. You know what I mean? So
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, the metaphor. I've I can't imagine I'm the first to use this metaphor, but the metaphor I think about just in terms of the like I talk a lot on my channel about loving practical effects more so than CGI. Just as like there's something about it. I think it's because to me it feels like going to a magic show, and I think you just put it in a way that makes a lot of sense. Because like when you go to a magic show, it's a gasp, right? If you see like
yeah,
a great trick, he's not a sorcerer, or she's not like actually doing wizardry, but it's like
maybe not, maybe not.
yeah,
There's
maybe
always a
not.
possibility.
Yeah, it's always 1%. But when you see something,
When it's live, you think, well, maybe you never
yeah,
know. Maybe he's going to get eaten by a tiger. Who knows? You know?
yeah, that
Yeah,
gasp is a great way to put it. I think because
yeah.
it is like when you see what you did on Mask of Zorro, it's like there's not a way. I'm sure there's like with camera tricks you could make it because the way they actually on Mask of Zorro, the way you all cut in you versus Antonio Banderas, and in a bit I have the clip pulled up. I would love to go through it. It genius way of sort of like cutting to sort of like work in stuntmen versus action stars, but also you get the benefit of both. I think. I mean, just as like as a fan and lover of the movie, I think you get the benefit of seeing the gasp-worthy stuff of like that's you going and somersaulting over a guy, kicking at the other guy, perfect cuts. That's you jumping over a tree branch. But it's just Zorro, and then you see Antonio Banderas, and you get the best elements of both because like he's the world expert actor. He's one of the greatest actors of the last 30 years, and you're world expert horse
Yeah.
stuntman. So
Well,
there's
that's what
something
made
about it.
the Mask of Zorro so special, is that I had the perfect horses at the perfect time. I think after I saw the storyboards, I had to pretty much had that sequence figured out in previs, probably within 10 days. There were a few small things we had to tweak to make them physically possible. But I sent them the tape in a week, previous, and they went, what the, because they weren't, it's, but I had the perfect horses, and luckily I got the chance to do it. I couldn't
Yeah.
have done it on local horses. It had to be on my horses. So that's what made that sequence possible with the horses I had at the time. And as far as I told you, I may have mentioned this before when we talked. I didn't meet the director of the Mask of Zorro until I was at the premiere, and I never worked with the director of first unit. I only worked with the director of second unit, Glenn Randall. But the director came up and said, "I just love the way you matched Antonio." Well, the funny thing was, I'd worked like 6 weeks on second unit, never met Antonio until the last day. They brought him in, he watched the sequence, and then he was actually matching me. So I thought that was funny because that never happens. You know what I mean? I'm always trying to match the mannerisms of my actor when I'm doubling him, or whether it be Tobey Maguire or whoever. I know that seems impossible, but that's true on The Ride with the Devil. I and Anyway, you see my point. Very
Yeah, yeah,
seldom
yeah.
do I usually have to match the actor, but we'd done such a large body of work before he ever came to second unit that he just decided, hey, I'll just do what. Yeah, how do you do your rings and yeah, and all that stuff. So
I mean, that
so it
speaks
matched
to
perfectly.
also what a good actor Antonio Banderas is. Like he knows that, like in like to sell the movie, right? Like it's his
Yeah.
job to sell the character, and that's part of it. Is like, well, Tad did such a great job with this, so I gotta, it's like it's not. There could be an ego thing, I imagine, right? Of like, well, he's got to act like me, but it's not with him. Like at least in that case, it seems like it was just.
Luckily not, because we would have had to go back and shoot 6 weeks worth of work
Yeah,
because of the schedule. We'd already done it. No, I think, and also, of course, Glenn Randall Jr., he had a great vision of how to, where to put the inserts and, what action he needed to put it all together. And that's what makes the Mask of Zorro so special, is because not always do you get to do what you do best, and in that kind of a movie, but also have such a great crew, an additional crew around. The great directors,
hmm,
great wranglers, great train. The other horses, the other sequences are, you know, whether it's climbing the stairs or all that stuff. It's just a great movie.
yeah,
It's really, I think Spielberg said that it may be the last Western made before CGI takes over. And
yeah.
we're hearing the same thing right now with AI. And I remember a movie that we did called G.I. Joe, the first one. And I remember the guys in Prague were flipping these cars, literally flipping these cars end over end, because we had the GoPros inside watching the force of them taking the hits. And then they put the actors, running across the top of these flipping cars. And when I say flipping cars, I mean they were actually flipping it, and it just took away from the actual stunt that was being done.
Yeah.
I just crushed me because the moment they did that, you didn't believe the cars were really flipping anymore because they didn't really need to. So
Yeah.
when we look toward the future of I think that we're going to have to probably somehow distinguish how much of it's AI, or how much
Yeah.
of this is generated that way. Because I think, well, first off, for me, during the Mask of Zorro, they said CGI was going to take over, and it didn't. It
Yeah.
enhanced. People still appreciated hard day's work and a hard fall. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? They still appreciate a hard. I mean, one of the best things you can do at the Stunt Awards when you're winning an award is best hard hit.
Yeah.
That's the one you want to win. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
um, so I think in the future, as great as AI is, and as far as like I love Dune 2, but that's exactly what I went there for. I
Yeah.
knew what I was going to see, and it still surprised me. It was so fantastic. But when it comes to horses, like for instance, the Lone Ranger, you can't make fun of horses that much
Yeah.
because they're legitimate. And they're legitimate in their spirit that everyone appreciates. It's almost like you're making fun of everyone's spirit when you make fun of a horse in a movie.
Yeah.
It's a little bit kind of like, if it's real horse work, it's great. And I've looked at a lot of AI. They can't get a horse right to save their neck.
No.
Yeah. And they
Yeah.
will eventually, but I still want to appreciate it the same way. I'd rather watch the spirit as a cartoon than an AI generated horse in a movie. Just
Yeah,
for myself.
I feel totally the same way, and I'm probably probably a little too, I don't want to say naively optimistic about it, but I think that there's a real appetite for the real stunt work and the real, like, my audience. I've grown, knock on wood, fortunately fairly quickly on TikTok. Just a lot of what I'm saying is like, hey, look how cool this real stuff is that we used to do. Just like
Yeah.
pointing at you or pointing out, even stuff from like Europe and 60 years ago, these like great,
Oh, sure.
sort of hand drawn animation stuff that they have.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally, the analogy I use is comparing it to, like, if I give you two cookies and one has a bit of dirt in it and one doesn't, and you can't taste the difference, it's like, well, you still don't want the one with dirt in it. It's like, so maybe even if AI is like, it's like you still want to know, that this
Yeah.
was made with love and care and everything else. But I share your thing that there's still something a bit, I think, uncanny about it, in a way that I'm appreciative of the directors, especially like Christopher Nolan and
Hmm.
Tom Cruise and his stuff. I know Cruise does. I think they both do a really good job of integrating fairly minimal CGI. But I think that's some of the draw of both their movies is, like, on some level, it's like they're doing the stunts, and I think it
Yeah.
speaks to that magic stuff. It's like they're there. You can't fake a lot of what they do.
They're taking the risk. I mean,
Yeah.
however many times it was rehearsed or thought out or planned, because as it should be, because whether it's Tom Cruise or your brother doing the stunt, I would want them as safe as possible
Yeah.
for the biggest wow possible, but still as safe as possible, so it's repeatable.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately we hardly ever get it once, and I don't know how many times I've heard, "All right, everybody, tense up." First off, I don't work really good when I'm tensed up. They always say, "I get tense up." We only have one shot at this. We can never, ever do this again. And of course, we'll be doing it again next Tuesday. Because whatever was supposed to happen didn't happen at all.
Yeah.
So, so we're all back next Tuesday. Okay, what are you doing next Tuesday? And we come back and do it again. So that's, you kind of, after you've heard that enough times. But what I'd like to say is I'm embracing AI. I think it's a great assistant. I think it's going to have a great place for doing previses and say, so that everyone's
Yeah.
on the same page before real people have to take the knocks and the falls and the horses as well. Um, as your audience, I watched some of the comments, I read some of the comments, and they appreciated the live stuff, and they also appreciated the horses. And I just wanted to put out there that the trick riding thing has led me to a conversation. When I was on the Mask of Zorro, I had the I lost a horse when we first went down there. He unloaded from the trailer, got a drink of water, and had a heart attack, died in my
Mm.
arms. And I remember it just killed me. You know what I mean? Because there's nobody's fault, and he hadn't even done anything yet. And the trip shouldn't have done it because he was being legged up like 7 miles a day, and he was in the show at Excalibur, so he was in great shape. It was just a freak heart attack. I don't know what it
Yeah.
was, but anyway, and I guess he could have had a heart attack while we were doing the movie. So it's a good thing. If it had to happen, that's where it had
Yeah.
to happen. But I buried him. I put a cross up pointing north. And I remember all the other regulars were kind of looking at me like I was strange and kind of laughing at me. And I told my mom, I said, I'm ready to come home. I don't have any desire to do this anymore. This is really not started the way I wanted it to go. And she goes, Well, Tad, you have to understand that most people don't ever have that kind of connection with the horse that we do.
Yeah.
Everyone either has a leg, a rein, a whip, a line, something on the horse to control it. Whereas as we're performing upside down, backwards, and doing all these things, we have to depend on our horse to do it for us. And she says, so we have to trust them beyond what anyone else trusts them. We have to put our life in their hands, which is kind of ironic because she died, in a rodeo. But she said, with outside of war and maybe someone that jumps over that 7'2" wall, Persant's wall, no one else ever has to give their life over to a horse.
Yeah.
So then I stepped back and I realized there's someone different here, and I think it's me. And that's why our horses have the golden ticket. When they come here, they come here. I don't look any horses. I mean, a lot of horses have just landed with us, whether it's gifted to us or whatever. And now I don't look horses in like a, gift horse in the mouth. And it's a true thing because they've always come around to being the one horse I had to have for something,
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of how we think about it. And we also have the opportunity. I think we have a unique conversation. The fact that I know our horses love to perform.
Yeah.
And there's no question about it. We know that they love to perform because we can't force them to do their job in the position that we're in. And I think that conversation is not really, looked at very often. It's kind of a fresh perspective, but it's from generations of doing this that we truly believe that there are animals that love to perform because we see the anticipation, the struggle, and the relief in them as it is in us. Because my mom said life is made up of three things: anticipation, struggle, and relief. And each piece of that is pretty big and enjoyable once you're recognizing which stage you're in. Yeah.
Storytelling. I mean, that's all movies too, right? That's like anticipation and
The struggle and then the payoff. Yeah, then the payoff.
That's one of the other that's one of the other videos I did on Zorro, was just how well musically the score does that. My mom's a musician, my uncles are musicians, and there's a concept of dominant and tonic and tension and relief, and the way James Horner did the score in that movie. That's another. I mean, I could go like you said earlier about a question. You could write a whole book on it. A whole book could be written about just even the way you guys, tied in the score with the stunts and everything else, of like even timing like the release of the music to the release of the stunt and the finishing of the stunt. It's like people who don't know, and me when I first watched it, and even me years later, it's like I still just disappear into it of just like, oh my goodness, like there's a feeling you get that's sort of like almost spiritual that comes across, I think, in all that stuff, where it's like if it's made with love and it's timed like that, it's just tremendous. On the horses, one thing you mentioned, since you brought that up, I in the Red Bull article, you said, quote, I've seen horses that have nothing, no job, no talent, bottom of the pecking order, and then all of a sudden when they get a job and they learn how to do something rewarded for it, it changes the way they look at everything. And you called horses the noblest creatures on earth. So I was curious, I guess, just going along with what you were just talking about. I could ask a million questions about horses, I guess, but maybe a simple one would be.
We can always do a part two someday. We can always do a part two.
You're so fascinating to talk to, Ted. I just love all aspects I love learning new things, right? And obviously, I've never, so. But I'd be curious, like, so when you get a new horse, like, I guess, like, how long before do you know that, like, okay, this is a horse that's going to want to perform, and it's going to be like accept performing, and it's going to be okay with it and like it, and then like how long before, like, is it like 8 months? Is it I'm assuming it's not like 3 days in, it's like you're doing tricks on them. So I'd be curious, like, if I'm saying, okay, Tad, here's a new horse, like, how long before that the horse might be ready to work on something like a Zorro, or maybe not something as complex as that, but maybe something smaller?
Gosh, that's a good question, and it's such a large answer. I don't know. I just have to trust. And I have to look at their natural talent. In other words, the way they move, the way they listen. I have to just then try to guess their past traumas or their life experience. A lot of times I'll get horses that are traumatized or thought to be no good or rejects or outlaws or whatever. Because those are usually the ones that they want to give away. You know what I mean? That just, they think you should have that horse.
That's fascinating even in itself. I figure you'd almost get everything from foals, or
No,
from babies.
I
Yeah.
don't raise them. I don't raise them because it's 5 years before I can. Now, there are some exceptional horses like my black mares I used in the Mask of Zorro. I had them bred to a Morgan Stallion, and I had
Mhm.
a second generation, and I wanted a third. I didn't get it, but I would keep that lineage in. I would invest the time and the energy or certain horses that I just can't imagine my life would have been what it would have been without those horses. It's like, you want to keep, something close to you or a piece of them forever.
Yeah.
That's the beautiful thing about movies, as I can have the most spectacular performance,
Mm.
the closest to a perfect performance I can ever have in a live show, but then it's gone. And it feeds me like theater feeds actors. But when I have the Mask of Zorro, those horses will live forever,
Yeah.
and it's such a gift to have them in film forever because
Yeah.
they deserve to be there. Yeah. So your question to me was, how long do I know? I don't know. How long does it take to train a basketball player?
Yeah.
It's individual. This is so individual. It's ridiculous. And I've had horses I've had to press into service in 30 minutes, immediately. And then I've
Yeah.
had horses I didn't touch for 7 years that just sat there and didn't do anything. And then all of a sudden there was a day that I needed another horse, and then they proved to be more than willing and more than capable. A perfect example is a gentleman went over to look at a half Andalusian because we love Andalusians when they move. And a friend of mine went over to look at him, and he had sent me a videotape of him rearing and walking back to the barn because he was barn sour. He
Mm.
was just wouldn't leave the barn. Says, "You don't want this horse. He's barn sour." I go, "No, actually, offer him $1,000 less and get him no matter what, because this horse is athletic enough to rear on his hind legs and walk all the way back to the barn with
Mm.
a guy on him." I said, but then I thought the horse was going to be a mess. I just never got around to working with him for a while, maybe several years. He just sat there with all the other horses in the big pen. And then all of a sudden I needed him, and I brought him in, and he never reared. He never did anything wrong. I think he was begging for something to do. And he's one of my best cast horses now, and I teach everyone on him because I teach with about 6 different horses for actors, because it's a progression that I teach them to comfort, and they wind up on a horse that I can literally voice control, and they ride with no hands and no legs, so they have to lean back and trust me and trust the horse, and it just changed. They ride backwards on that horse and all this stuff, and then all of a sudden they turn around and ride forwards. It's like, oh, this is easy, and
Mm.
that's the frame of mind. I guess my dad did that to me. Whenever I was scared of something, he gave me something harder to work on. And then when I got to go back to that other thing, it was easy now. So it's just
Yeah.
a way that we teach. It's kind of a reward system. But yeah, so there is no time. I don't put a time limit on them. I
Yeah.
don't, because I know that I now know that through experience, they're supposed to be here.
Yeah.
And my mom always said, God doesn't make junk, and he doesn't make mistakes. So if this horse is here, there's a reason why you need him. And
Yeah.
but you have to come at it with that perspective. We don't buy and sell. I'm not looking for horses aggressively all the time. I'm not trying to sell horses to anyone aggressively. Everything. That's why I have such a large herd, because something in my herd will be close to what I need it to do. That I
Mhm.
think it has the right mind. Like falling horses. We talked a little bit about this on before we got on, about how to look at a fall that a horse does on film.
Yeah.
In the old days, they would make a day horse in a couple of days, and if it worked, it worked. If it didn't work, it didn't work. Or the really great horses had long careers. I was actually I had falling horses, and then I saw someone do one on film on the Ride with the Devil, and I was so impressed with how calm the horse was, how well trained he was. And he was trained, or the kid that I talked to, his trainer was a jumping horse man, so he understood forward momentum, and like squeezing the horse out from between your legs like a tube of toothpaste, and get them very light in
Mm.
the front so they can get to their hip and then their shoulder and never hurt their head. And all of that made total sense to me. So I rethought everything of what I knew how to do, and I went with that because, like I said, I'm deep in tradition until I find a better way. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And so whether it's the steps that Yakima Canutt made, that I now have similar ones that are kind of combined all the different styles into one aircraft aluminum step. You know what I mean? So it can do multiple things.
Yeah.
It's better hidden. It's the way to train a horse. I never stop learning how to train horses. That's the beautiful thing about it. It's like, how do you stop learning how to raise children? You
Yeah.
can't. I mean, and I always tell directors when they say, how fast can they run? How far can they run? How many times can they run? I go, think of them like an 8-year-old child, and we'll be on the same page. but they're an 8-year-old child who's not being paid to be here. So it's
Yeah.
my job to make sure that we don't use them up too much. They're not inhumanely thought about. Also, that they're given a rehearsal so they get to see everything. And then the last thing, of course, is to make sure I get your shot in the least amount of times possible. So a lot
Hmm.
of times they'll want to do the horse release, so they'll run like 20 horses a mile, hoping for 3 to 6 seconds of perfect. I say, I'll tell
Hmm.
you what, I'll run them a football field 10 times. I'll give you 10 seconds of magic every time.
Hmm.
And but they'll walk back, they'll rest. And when I think they're ready again, we'll go again. If you run them a mile, you get one.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, see, but if you speak to them in that way, so that you're there, kind of like um, presenting the plan, not just a problem, then all of a sudden it makes sense. You have to just explain to them in a way it makes sense. You get to try it 10 times instead of one time. And all of a
Yeah.
sudden, yeah, we'll take that one. But it also saves my horse. It saves my horses. So anyway, getting back to the horse fall, the main thing that you want to watch when you're watching a horse fall, whether it's a way old movie or a new movie or whatever, is if their head ever hits the ground. Their head should never hit the ground. Of course, the
Yeah.
ground is prepared. My horses, I bring them in, I lay them down in the spot. They see all the camera positions. I explain to the camera that my head's at 9 foot. When the horse falls, it's going to be more like 13 foot in the air. You know what I mean? So I give them what they need for frame. So I said, look, gentlemen, I'll do this, or ladies and gentlemen, I'll do this once or twice, but I'd rather do it once.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? I'd just rather do it one time.
Yeah.
So let's set all these cameras. Let's get it right. The first time I jumped over the tree on Zorro, I told them I was going to jump. They cut me off at the waist because I jumped completely out of the movie. And so the one that's in the movie now is the second one, because the first one I was so hyped, I jumped completely off the screen. So
That's wild.
anyway, yeah.
I wondered about that when I watched that, and I'll like to get into that in a minute, because you do a very kind of short jump over the tree. Like, it almost feels like it to a viewer hearing you say that. I was like, I was wondering when I watched it, I was like, could he only get that amount of height, or was he like you were trying to just like only jump like a foot? I guess because you were jumping out of frame potentially.
Well, no, not that so much. You have to remember, I gave the horses' backs a foot of clearance, because when a horse runs, they come 6 inches off the ground, maybe more. So I
Mm,
had to make sure there was clearance for their backs. They would duck their heads, but I had to make sure their withers
I
were
see.
clear. And then the tree itself is almost 2.5 feet. So it doesn't look like I jumped very high over the tree. But
I wasn't trying to be
that's
insulting. I,
no, no,
I
no,
just, yeah.
no. I see your point, and I think I think the cut kind of makes it strange, because you don't see me loading jump.
Mm,
You just see me kind of like, just as I'm already jumping, you see me. And the only thing that bothered me about the whole movie was the fact that they kind of sped that sequence up
mm,
slightly. You can tell the film rate has been kind of played with. They were paying tribute to the older movies, when they would kind
yeah.
of like speed the action. They play with
Over
the
crank
speed.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it really disappointed me, because if you look at the horses' manes and tails, they're straight out. They're flying. They're running as fast as they can anyway.
Mm,
And when they undercranked the film, it looked like we had to speed it up to make it look better. And that's the only thing that I noticed the very first impression I had. So that makes the jump just happen so quick. I think,
yeah.
if it were way down the day, they would probably double that. You'd jump it fast the first time, and then you'd go back and do the whole special, I don't know,
Yeah.
like whatever.
Yeah.
But today you would never do that like I did it. You would be on a traveler, you'd have a crane up there, you'd be on a wire, and they would just assist you. If you were going to die, you'd just throw your hands up, and they'd ratchet you out there because literally when I went in there, I either made it or I didn't. And when I didn't, it just wiped me out. I mean, I
Mm,
remember the first time I rehearsed it in Mexico City with my wife for started film, and I ran it the first time, and I hit it, and it knocked me out. And I go, when I woke up, I go, "Did you get it?" And she goes, "What?" I go, "Did you film the whole thing with me getting knocked out?" She goes, "I don't even know where the camera is." I go, "Okay, there's how this works. If I get killed, we need it on film."
yeah. Oh, that's great. So actually, I'm assuming if they needed another stunt like that in Hollywood, please, you need another stunt like that in some movie. I don't know if we had I mentioned, so Tad is the third generation, and there is a fourth generation composed of his kids and other few other young people, friends of the family, I think, that are just people that you've known, that you've sort of been training. And Tad has four boys. If they were, one of them is Gatlin, who, if you like the movie Hail Caesar, which I tried to, I don't have a Zorro shirt, but I have a Joel and Ethan Coen shirt. Hail Caesar's on the back, so I tried to wear
Nice,
a
nice,
movie
nice.
shirt for that. It's one of my mom's favorites. She loves that movie. She was real excited that I was talking to you. But I told her that I was like, yeah, it's like that is Tad's son, Gatlin Griffith, in the scene where Alden Ehrenreich, Kobe Doyle, again, the Coen's big old movie lovers, they're doing a throwback to the old, Roy Rogers, Errol Flynn, and Errol Flynn type of days. And Tad's son Gatlin rides on a horse. I think he does a handstand, and then there's like a tree stunt. So be curious, if you were to do that Zorro stunt today. You're saying it would be, you'd have like a crane. Would you do it the same way, or would you would, like, if you were coordinating it, you'd do it with like ropes and stuff? If it was Gatlin, I guess, as
Yeah,
like a.
well, with Gatlin, we placed it's in a national park, Vasquez Rocks, which is the coolest thing. Vasquez Rocks is across the street, and
Mm.
when they put in their visitor center, I found out that the mask that Zorro is based on Vasquez.
Oh,
So I've lived across the street from the outlaw that is, that Zorro is based on. So
that's so
who
cool.
knew? I mean, I
Yeah.
ride it every day. So no, we're in a national park. So slanted rocks. You'll notice in the back of Hail Caesar, those are the very famous Vasquez rocks. Super famous location in LA. Been in a million movies and car commercials and all that stuff. So basically, what we did is we moved in two huge truss towers. We
Hmm.
had a 2,000-pound test line above him, and then he would get up in the shoulder stand, and then he would come toward the tree, but there was no limb where it was. But what we did is we measured exactly where he would impact that, how much the branch would give as he began to flip around. So yeah, it was my experience with doing the stunt practically that I now know how I can do the exact same thing repeatedly, rehearse it, train the horses. Because the difference in me doing the Mask of Zorro and the things that come up nowadays is my horses don't have 10,000 performances under their belt
Hmm.
doing all this stuff. We're not in the live show business as much anymore. So what I have to do now is take a specific horse, because that was it's a visual effects shot. So there was a line that was stretched from A to B that had a tag to the horse because he had to be on the exact perfect line to where he impacts the tree. So everything had to be specifically exactly right. And what we do is we rehearse it to the point where everyone could do it in their sleep, you know.
Hmm.
But it actually looks great because he came on there as fast as he could run, dove up into a shoulder stand, and then was just dead man, what we call dead man. There was a little bit of retardation, a little bit of relief, just a little bit through a gold tail, but so it wasn't just a stop. But I mean, it just looks like he wrapped his legs around that tree, and that's how fast he came off the horse. And it's the separation that he had from the horse as he came up like that I sold to Coen Brothers, because that wasn't in the original storyboard. And I
Hmm.
said, that's what sells it's real. I mean, you can do the trick and you can be sitting on the limb, but you need that separation of the man coming up and watching his horse leave him. That's going to sell the whole thing. If you really,
Hmm.
I mean, if you really want it to work, and they approved it. And so, yeah, there's no reason for someone to go back and run out of a tree. When they first asked me to do that on the phone, they said, "Can you jump over a limb?" I go, "Yeah, I think so." I get down there, there's a friggin' tree dug into the wood. It was like it was literally a tree. And I remember when they got ready to shoot it, because it was the last thing we shot, because they got everything else first, and then they go, "Okay, let's, now that we haven't killed you, let's go do this." And I remember all the bark was knocked off the tree. They had to put fake bark back there because I'd hit it so many times trying to get over it. And the very first day that everyone came to second unit to watch this happen, I had like 7 stuntmen lined up that were in the other portions of the second unit sequence, the ones I was kicking off and all that stuff. And they watched me the first time and I missed it and really ate it. And so I get up, I get back on my horses, and I go back and try to get. I do it one more time, and I make it. And they go, "Okay, that's it, Dad. You cannot practice anymore, because if anything happens to you, they're just going to line us up in Zorro suits and just keep making us go do it until somebody." Well, anyway, I agreed not to practice anymore if I didn't have to. But anyway, it was a good part of the movie. Seeing those old guys just go, "Oh no, no more practicing for you. You made it once. That's good enough." No,
That's great.
it's funny. It's nice when, and we still do those practical stunts when there's no other way.
Yeah.
It's just sometimes you just have to, you just gotta go. You just
Yeah.
gotta be ready to go. And you hope that the adrenaline takes over. And I'll tell you what really helps us the most in stunt work is the fear of failure. And I
Yeah,
have a huge fear of failure. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Because I always think that I'm as good as the last thing I did. I don't ever rest on my laurels because in the live show business, as I said before, I don't have cut in my head.
yeah.
I don't have that. I wasn't born in this business. I just didn't start in this business. So I don't have cut. I just have to always have another plan.
Mm,
I have to have another way to make it okay or make it safe. And then, like I said, if you rip your pants in front of 17,000 people, what kind of tricks can I do now that they don't know my pants are ripped? You got to have a plan for everything.
yeah.
So that's how we look at it.
Yeah, it's interesting that that's another going back a little bit to the sort of CGI AI stuff. I think one of the reasons I've personally, these '90s movies like Mask of Zorro, and I think just the '90s, I think is one of my favorite decades in film. I think because of there was that at that point 100 years of and more in some disciplines, but there was 100 years of movie craft that sort of led up to it. So you had generations of generations of generations of generations training and teaching, and you can see this in someone like you, who it's like you come from, and your kid. Not to age you or any of your family,
Oh
but
yeah,
there's at least there's 100 years behind Gatlin
oh yeah,
doing a stunt now, right? And
oh yeah,
it's
absolutely. And
more if you
we
count
we
that.
we totally um, respect that, understand it, and it's tradition. As we ride for the
Yeah,
brand, not in a silly cowboy way, but I mean you can't help but know that you're standing on the my dad's shoulders and my grandpa's shoulders. He produced, like I said, Wild West shows, early Wild West shows, and then my father's in it forever. So, but I didn't want my kids really performing at every rodeo every weekend. So they've
yeah,
taken this thing that we do, and like I sent you the short, the thing that they were doing,
yeah.
Born Outlaws, and they're making it new again. And that's the nice
Yeah.
thing about
It's
this can be
great.
a
I
new
was
again.
so
Yeah, this
excited. Yeah. I
good.
don't know
Yeah,
if that's publicly available or if they're gonna post it online, but if you are listening to this and it's available, then I would
yeah.
definitely go see
I'll
it.
get back with you. I'll let Gatlin. I'll tell. I know that he's landing the plane with his his soundtrack and everything out there, trying to get the colorization right.
Yeah.
It's going to be fun. It is a nod to the Mask of Zorro, those kind of movies, because they've had the training. It's like Channing Tatum. I mean, he's a great actor, but he's better stuntman than half of the people that double him. He's that talented, and
Yeah.
so it's nice to see the person, actually do the stuff that can really ride, can really
Yeah.
sell it, because that's what made the Mask of Zorro work. Is my God, Anthony Hopkins. We haven't mentioned his name.
Yeah.
Just the reverence for the old Zorro, just the power that he brings to that part. And
So emotional.
Antonio played it perfect. I remember I read the script and I'm going, oh, this is weird. I had no idea. I
Yeah.
didn't know how to read a script anyway. I didn't have any idea what I was doing at that time. But a cold read, if you didn't have any idea who's going to play the parts, it was cute, whatever. But then they brought the whole thing to life. It was
Yeah.
magic. And, like Catherine Zeta-Jones. And if you notice in the Masters, it's funny because they cut my pants in the scene. So the whole sequence I'm writing, I have a big hole in my pants, but then they took it out of the sword fight. So, so there's one of those little things
Yeah.
that yeah.
I
So
never
there's one of
noticed
those,
that.
I know,
Yeah.
don't tell nobody, just
Yeah.
between us, just
Yeah.
between us.
Between us. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah, that was another. I think I ended up doing 8 videos on because the mask is like I watched it and I was just like the first one, I was like, I did. I think the first one I did was on your horse because I was like, just gotta talk about this. I loved it
Oh,
so
that's
much,
cool.
and then I was like, as I started thinking about, it, I was like, maybe I should do another couple videos because I started thinking like. With Anthony Hopkins, as you say, I did a whole video on just the way he says one word in the scene with Catherine Zeta-Jones. It's like his voice quivers in a way that like it just is so emotional. And to your point about the script, I totally agree with you. Like it's actually there's one. It's funny you say that because that's the one video I didn't do that I might go back and do. Where I was saying like
Mhm.
technically it's not the craziest script in the world. It doesn't sound like a Tarantino or like a Aaron
Mhm.
Sorkin back and forth, and that's not to be insulting at all. But the script is structured perfectly in terms of like building and the tension and release, and you have the actors who are able to take the words and actually sell them and elevate them. To your point, it'd
Yeah.
probably be like saying like there's a horse chase. It's like, well, if you read that on the page, it's like okay, but then if Tad Griffith is doing the horse chase, it's like oh okay, well that's a horse chase. Same thing with Andy
Well,
Hopkins and the actors.
I like Catherine Zeta-Jones. She goes, vigorous father, very vigorous. I mean, that's a great line.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
great line.
Shout out
Uh,
to Stuart Wilson too on the other side of that. And
absolutely, yeah.
yeah, he's one of my favorite villains in movies. He's great in Lethal Weapon 3. He's also good as the dad in term. I think it's Vertical Limit, another Martin Campbell movie.
Yeah,
It's a fun one. You know,
yeah.
one thing I wanted to ask you about the because we were talking about the sort of that 100 years of history, and we were talking about sort of the animal welfare and how important that is to you all. It almost seems like that's one of the things that, and also it kind of ties into the CGI thing. It's a thing that sort of makes me sad that we don't see as much of the horse stunts and we don't see as much of this practical stuff anymore. Because I thought it was fascinating that there's a parallel between both how horses were treated historically in Hollywood, which was unfortunately not great, like for much of the history of Hollywood. But that is so totally the opposite of how you guys deal and treat and interact with horses. And it's also, it's in the same way of sort of the way I noticed in the article you talked about even training your kids, of like you had a totally different training style that, not to compare apples and oranges or humans and horses, but like, you mentioned that you were trained a little harder, growing
A
up.
little harder.
A little
Oh yeah,
harder.
a little.
But
Yeah, I used to. I would fall off my pony, and my dad would be walking toward me, pulling his belt off. So I was more scared of him than dying, and I
yeah,
knew that I couldn't put my kids through that. And I
yeah,
mean, I don't know why he did that. I guess that's how he was trained. But
yeah.
I say
It's
we
common for
don't.
that generation, I think.
And well, he was 51 when I was born, so it was more like my grandfather. And so
Mhm.
I remember I like to say we don't drive around with our car windows up smoking in the car anymore. We evolve.
My dad
We
has the same
we learn.
stories.
Yeah. But, it's crazy. Just it's like rub some dirt on it, blah blah blah. No pain, no gain, all that stuff, all that old cowboy mentality. It was funny because when he wasn't training and he wasn't being the tough guy, he's a lovely man and loved horses and all that stuff. So I learned that tender side of my mom. She babysat everyone that came to train, and she
Mhm.
just loved every horse so much, and she found God in every horse, and it's cool. But I guess my point is, my boys now, whether this was inspired by my father from above or whatever, but I taught them on these ponies and a round pin on a lunge line because I could talk to the ponies and train them and say the right thing at the right time. And I could also ease them into things and out of things and talk them through things. And this developed, it's funny because the way I trained my kids how to trick ride, it took minutes instead of days. I mean, they learned within weeks what I learned, I would practice for years. And when I went to the stunt driving class, there used to be a driving school for stunt drivers. During the class, we would have to show him the money, which means show me the money. In other words, show me the shot, that, you're going to get paid for. And you had to be within 5 degrees of perfect. So I took that mentality back from the driving school and I started employing it into my trick riding lessons and said, look, if you can do this within 3 degrees of perfect, you can move on. We'll do it one time and just keep going.
Yeah,
So that meant the practice isn't going to be just muscle memory, repeat, wash, copy, whatever. We were able to just do it once perfectly because that's what a performance is. That's what a stunt is. You get to do it once with everything you've got. And if you do it right, we move on to the next thing. And that's changed the entire way I train. It's now the way I train. You mentioned that you don't see as much horsework and stuff in the movies. There's really no school for it. You
yeah,
can't ride a bull or ride a bucking horse and just come into Hollywood and expect it to actually teach you the timing and how to fall and how to, you know, how camera works and which is the primary camera. There's 5 cameras. I
yeah,
asked the question, okay, I can only perform for one or two of these cameras on this shot. Which are your primaries? Cameras. Well, oh, this is A and this is B and this is C. Maybe it'll be okay for the impact. But these other cameras are just getting hoof shots and, and just tight stuff of hands on range and stuff. So, but that's a question you have to learn to ask.
yeah,
I mean, you have to know that, ask that. And so basically what I'm saying is, um, we now have developed it started out by training actors for
mhm,
films, and a lot of them would assess them here, and then I'd send them to Europe. Europe has a much more stringent writer assessment protocol than we do. And so I use theirs. I was using it anyway, so I've continued to use theirs. And I just finished 2 actors that are going to Colombia that are, I bring them in here for 3 days or 4 days, and I start from the ground up, how to step up, how to approach a horse, what to look at first, how to do your own tack, what you're allowed to ask for, what you shouldn't ask, what you should be expected to know. Because this is a huge mystery because they don't have Wild West shows anymore. We don't
Hmm.
have that many specialty acts where people can
Yeah.
learn this. So we had to create, we have a stunt and actor stunt school as well that has 3 levels. Level 1 for novice, level 2 for people that have ridden quite a bit and, want to get into stunts. And level 3 is for stunt people who want to go to the next level of stirrup drags and horse falls and deadmans and all that kind of stuff. We had to create one because there wasn't one, and it's because of our background with counting strides and counting the seconds and using the timing of the horses. It helped me survive this industry. So it gives them a great platform and a great beginning and a great tool bag for them to use when they're on set. Because
Yeah.
the big thing about being on set is, it's a very scary place to be, and you don't want to be the squeaky wheel. You don't want to ask too many questions, but I give people permission what they can ask for. You said that horses have not notoriously always been really well taken care of in Hollywood. There was a time when they were just treated like props,
Yeah.
but so were stunt people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They would
Yeah.
just open the gate and say, "Who
Oh
wants to
God. Yeah.
fall off a horse today?" So then some guy would raise his hand, "I'll fall off a horse today." So that's why stunts never got the especially cowboys, because the cowboys are a dime a dozen when they're out of work, and they just have that. It was, they're not like a guy that jumps off of a 100-foot building. That takes a little more specialty. But a
Isn't that how
cowboys
in
must just be tough. Yeah, cowboys
that
must be just tough. Yeah,
I can't remember is it Singing in the Rain? I think isn't the main actor, he gets his start just by being the guy willing to go through stuff in his movies. I think
yeah,
that's how. Yeah.
yeah,
Gene Kelly in that movie in the narrative, right?
yeah.
He's just like,
And
I'll take a
yeah,
fall. Yeah.
yeah, and it's not that much different than Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I mean, it's
Yeah.
funny how close that story is to how kind of really
Yeah.
is. But anyway, long story short is that's why now I think they're starting to recognize stunts as, but they had to change the name to action creation or stunt
Mm.
creation. It's got another word for it. But
Yeah.
if you can imagine how movies would be without action in it, and to
Well,
imagine that all this action happens without any kind of design or rehearsal or creativity is crazy. I mean,
yeah.
every part of movies require so many people, but to have left stunt work out for so long because someone was willing to fall down, but they have to fall down right. They have to fall down in the right spot, or it doesn't count. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Two things I think of on that. When we were talking about I guess he might have been the coordinator or maybe your boss on Mask of Zorro, Glenn Randall Jr. Right?
mhm.
He was a famous stuntman. I think he was. Did he do the coordination or was he the stuntman in Raiders of the Lost Ark for the famous? I think for a couple of the famous scenes in there that I believe were. I think he worked on that as well.
Yeah,
But I'd be curious, just in terms of collaboration. It's interesting that you say that about the stunt folks and coordinators not having the respect. I totally wonder about that as someone who's obviously removed from the industry as just like a fan and I wouldn't say I'm a total critic, right? But it's just like I'm trying to do my thing. In some of the stuff I talk about, it's like, oh, Spielberg, he knows how to direct an action scene so well. Or like Martin Campbell. I'm like, Martin Campbell, it's like I've always thought he's one of the better action directors because he did, Mask of Zorro and Casino Royale and Goldeneye, which are 3 tremendous action movies. But you don't
yeah,
necessarily hear him in the same sort of like respect level as like a John McTiernan or a Steven Spielberg, which is, those guys are great. I love them. But it was interesting hearing you say that, you met Martin Campbell at the premiere and that,
mhm.
that sequence was directed by a second unit. Is it a second unit action director?
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
I'd be curious, like, between that and also what you talked about with the Coen brothers about like you saying like, well, that can you do this? And then you gave them like all the thing and you've talked about your, if you have 5 cameras, I can look at 2. It sounds like that there's a sort of a big legacy that might basically, it seems like that we should maybe start knowing the names of some second unit action directors, maybe be a little bit more in terms of like looking at how well these scenes are constructed and edited and performed.
yeah. I've worked for some great second unit directors, which I don't call second unit directors. I call directors.
Mm.
They're second unit directors because I mean, if you're a director, when I got into the direct guild, I said, my second unit director. They go, no, you're just a director. That's how
Yeah.
naive I was. I don't even know the difference between a second unit director and second unit director. Normally, usually, most of the time, is going to be a stunt performer that's evolved through stunt coordination and has the basic knowledge of just how to use the camera. They've learned,
Mm.
they paid attention, and they were then given the opportunity. So you have to have the skill originally to do the stunts, hopefully. And then you've got to have the opportunity, and you have to have the people skills, and
Hmm.
then you just have to have the opportunity to be prepared, because I don't see it happening the other way. Getting off to the one side of that just for a second, I'm constantly asked, how do you become a stuntman? And there's typically three ways. You are drawn into the business because it's something you're the best in the world at, like motorcycles, cars,
Mm.
me with horses. That was how I got here. Or you're born into it, like my sons. They're born into it. So, the people will reach out to me when I have kids that know about horses, and they're tough and they're ranch kids and blah, blah, blah. But they also understand our industry. So they understand it's long hours, and they understand how the schedule can change. So that's handy for them to call stunt people who have kids first, because they understand the parameters of what's going to happen. You don't just back out at the last second.
Yeah.
Or you come out here and you live on someone's couch or someplace, and you just take it out. You wipe pads off. You hang out with people that do it until the opportunity presents itself. If you have enough talent, they'll stick you in. Those are the three typical ways. Of course, there's other ways, but those are the three main ways. Getting back to the second year directors, I worked for Dan Bradley, and he did Born Identity and the
Great
Spider-Mans.
movie.
Yeah, I remember I was his start assistant or coordinator, stunt coordinator. They have all these different names. Anyway, I was not directing, I was coordinating second unit for him in Cleveland. And he goes, "Would you like to direct? Would you like to come up there and coordinate the Cleveland car chase sequence?" I go, "Yeah, and I would love to, but I've heard that I don't have enough experience. The studios are never going to let me do it because I don't have enough credits." He goes, "What are you talking about? If I say you're the guy, you're the guy." I go, "See?" So it was so cool,
That's
because
awesome.
I was thinking it was going to be years of me grinding through being a second something, trying to get any coordinating credits, and bam, I'm coordinating, second unit on Spider-Man 3. And I was in the shot in the movie, and then also coordinating. It was really fun. But long story short is, those directors are great. I think that when they're able to stay connected, I mean, it's the toughest job in the world, because
Hmm.
unless you're a friend of the director, you're shooting stuff that he wishes he was shooting. So it
Yeah.
may be could be the toughest job in the world, to go in there and be you know, able to work your vision of what you think the action needs to be, and it still has to mesh what the director's vision is for the whole film. A lot of
Yeah.
times there's that whole, the talking heads wants to compete with the action. And I kind of relate this to rodeo. I know this argument. They think that competition in rodeo competes with the entertainment. And I
Mm.
say they don't compete, they complement each other. That's
Yeah.
why in the Olympics you have an opening and closing ceremonies. You have the greatest athletes in the world, but you still have an opening and closing ceremonies.
Right.
So when you're a second unit director, unless you're a great friend of the director, or you just have the reputation that you just don't, you can just stand on your own 2 feet, like several I've worked with. It's a really unique, great experience, because they want to do it fast, they want to do it safe, they want to do it well, and they're looking for that wow factor. And I guess the only thing I can say in my experience and what I've watched of this, and this is, maybe you didn't even ask me this question, but I'll tell you, I love it when the second unit director can stay connected to the project all the way through
Mm.
the editing process. So they
Sure.
they make sure, because I've seen shots lost. I did a shot in Cowboys and Aliens where the Harrison Ford slaps a black horse on the butt and drags a guy out, and there was a wide shot of him being dragged into the forest, and it cut right before the horse went into the forest. But just, I mean, Savro and I, we could just, the hair on the back of our necks stood up, because you could just picture what was going to happen to that guy as the horse
Yeah.
ran through the trees. You know what I mean? That never made the movie. It was a
Wow.
5D. It was a 5D shot of the guy's head just going away from camera. It didn't even show what's going on. So that's what I'm saying is, I love it when the second directors get to stay connected to the editing process. And this may be a
Yeah.
long-winded story. And I've
Not at
also
all.
thought there could be there's another whole thing that I think should be considered, and it's an action editor. And
Yeah.
I don't know, because I think there's some great editors out there, but I don't know if every one of them is a good action editor. And I
Yeah.
think there's a slot there that you could slide in somebody. I always thought it'd be like the emergency fix-it guy that flies in, and they've trapped themselves in a commercial and they can't figure out how to shoot out of it. And he
Yeah.
comes in, okay, we put it in a reflection through a car mirror, and then we did it, and then he flies away in his helicopter because he just came in and fixed it for a bunch of money. But you see, my point is,
Yeah.
an action editor would be really an interesting position. I don't think it's ever been created. I think an action producer is another slot could be
I
interesting because someone who knows how to produce action
yeah.
would be a thing that I think would be interesting.
I love editing and I love action, so I'll throw my Hollywood if you're
Yeah,
listening. I'll throw my name in there. I
there you
always
go.
think of it. The analogy I use is it's a lot like pro wrestling, a lot in terms of like the proper way to construct an action scene. I think, and honestly, one of the reasons the Zorro one works real well is like you have like in wrestling they talk about like the initial heat, and it's like if the heel punches the good guy, then the audience is waiting for that punch to be paid back. So you can do whatever else you want, but until the punch gets paid back, that's the thing that's going to satisfy the audience.
That's funny. Yeah, yeah,
And in Zorro, you guys do that. I mean, it's like because I think the heat almost is like he's missing his horse, so he's using these other horses to get back onto. When you talk about the tension relief, you jump through horse to horse to horse to horse, basically, and then you end on the actual your like Zorro's original,
yeah.
tornado, and
Right.
it makes the scene
Tornado, or tornado,
tornado.
whatever.
Yeah,
Tornado.
yeah, the
Tomato, tomato.
yeah,
Yeah, that's the full. That's the first circle. That's the full circle of getting back and then winding back up on his horse, which was actually one of my black mares, and I switched to a Frisian for the ride up and over the hill. But yeah, that's such a classic. It
yeah,
reminds me of the guy in the Civil War where he tips his hat, to the lady, and as he's turning his horse and runs away. You know what I
yeah.
mean? It's just that it was just such a classic, up and
It's
over.
so
It's
yeah,
yeah,
old swashbuckling Errol Flynn, old cowboy stuff. It's
yeah,
tremendous.
cool stuff.
Um, Going back just a little bit to what you had said about there not being a school for this, one of the things that I had noticed is that there is not, it seems like, not a certification program for animals like horses on set to be able to be on set, and that is something that you are wanting to like, or at least you have like I think in a couple of the interviews I saw expressed an opinion of like there should be a way to like certify that I think horses are like qualified to be on set in terms of like a school. So when you were talking about like there's not a school to go for this, I thought it was interesting because you're also sort of in the same way, with how much you guys care for your horses, you were thinking about the same thing for the horses, it seems like, too.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. I think that the way we've learned to train trick riding horses and that stuff, we learn in a certain order. So
Hmm.
one set of tricks helps them prepare for the next set of tricks. So the same thing with when we teach the trick riders, you learn the five foundation tricks, and everything you ever do is somehow directly linked back into those five foundation tricks. I think that I think I want to say that right now there's the larger suppliers of horses in the movie industry, and they do a great job. They prepare them and they do their prep and everything else. But there's the smaller projects where they just go into like a local market in Tennessee or Kentucky, and they
Hmm.
just find some local horses with some guys who have no set experience at all. And then they send American Humane in there, which will be there to protect the horses and all this stuff. And hopefully they're, everything goes well. But I'm just saying it's so much harder to work with animals who've never been on set or been
Yeah.
around on set. And this is where I think the Europeans have an edge over us, and that's why they make so many movies over there, because you'll more or less hire the brand. You'll hire certain ranch, you know what I mean? That's all I don't want to name anyone specifically, but I'm saying over there, you make your deal with the guy and you just furnish everything,
Hmm.
which means if he wants to set 30 other horses on there with 30 guys sitting there holding them, he can do that. And they're preparing them for the next movie
Hmm.
to be on set, and to be around set, and to go through the
Hmm.
whole process, because it behooves him to be preparing his next generation of horses on this movie set.
Yeah.
So it works really well. Whereas kind of like here, it's always the dollar. So you're always trying to find local horses that you can get by with and then try to make. And then it seems like it always kind of like becomes more than it was supposed to be. And then there's this really uncomfortable, thing like, well, we didn't really prep for this, but we can try it. So
Yeah.
I don't agree with that, because I believe in I believe in training. I
Yeah.
believe in, and I think until there are, and I've always said that there doesn't have to be a blacklist of people that
Hmm.
production should hire, but there should be a qualified, proven humane trainers that are recognized as that, which
Yeah.
they can lose that status anytime. In other
Yeah.
words, one bad deed or one mistake. But I also think you're able to come back and stand on your carpet and you can explain the situation. That's
Yeah.
why when I do stunts in the movies, or I'm coordinating stunts in movies, I want every shot filmed. I make sure the American Humane films every shot.
Yeah.
Now, if production wants me to go erase those afterward, I'm happy to do so. But if there's an accident, I want it not to be he said, she said, they
Yeah.
said. I want proof of exactly what happened so that we can learn from the mistake. And we know, because if there are such things as accidents, they
Yeah.
happen. It's different than negligence or
Yeah.
not, and I think the reason why we don't get as much prep is because it's not been used effectively. I work in fight teams like on 300. I
Hmm.
work in driving teams like on the Dukes of Hazzard. I've worked on wire work and all that stuff. They prep, they work hard. And
Yeah.
I mean hard. And so I bring that same mentality to the horse world. I
Yeah.
don't just go out there and have a beer and talk about, the old days. We work hard to prepare
Yeah.
and make sure that we can do it in our sleep. So we work so hard in prep that the shoot is like easy. It's
Yeah.
like we train so
It's
hard
like
to
an
trick
athlete,
ride.
right? It's like practice
We
harder than
train,
you. Yeah.
yeah, we train so hard to trick ride and to do all these things. The performance can only last 7 or 8 minutes, where we practice for hours. You know what I mean? Preparing for
Yeah.
that performance. So we prepare everything, walk, trot, canter slowly, and we find out all the mistakes. But I did John Wick 3. I had the horse. I was sitting 13 foot in the air. Horse was running at me. My lines go past the horse and then come back in under the stirrups through hard hoses. And I have to hold Keanu Reeves within a 3 foot circle, a perfect circle, because he's suspended on wires, running next to the motorcycle. And we were really going fast. So there's a lot going on. But I remembered, and I had everything figured out to where if I just released the lines, we had breakaways on the bridle on the lines. So in case the horse got loose or came off the rig, if he were to step on it, it would break. In other words,
Mm.
they were strong enough that I could hold him and steer him and stop him. But if he were to just step on him, it would break loose. So it
Mm.
would never do any damage. But I remember it was like 3 days before we shot the sequence, I thought of sewer hose. Yeah, because all the stuff that these lines had to, they would never, it's like an extension cord. They never would have snaked themselves through all this trussing and all the lighting and grid and all the stuff we had. So I had them run sewer pipe all the way through all that grid. So if I just released my lines, they were able to fall out the back of the truck without ever snagging on anything. But I thought about that up until 3 days. I came up with that idea 3 days before we shot. And so
Oh,
you're
wow.
never done trying to think of what else I could possibly need, So it was cool.
Yeah.
Worked out good.
Welcome back. Took a quick little break, and we're back with Tad, and we're going to go through everyone's favorite scene, my favorite scene, the Mask of Zorro. This is a real dream come true for me. So I have this pulled up, and I'm probably going to have to go sort of maybe frame by frame or a couple seconds because I won't be able to play it on YouTube or whatever. So I just wanted to ask about and kind of walk through this this stunt here. So or this sequence here. So we start with Banderas seeing the horses, and then sort of I think the first action piece comes when he's trying to get on his horse and he's trying to mount it. So I'd be curious, like even when he's trying to mount it here, is this you or I can't remember the other stunt fella's name, the one who also does the stunt up the steps?
No, Casey O'Neill, but
Casey, yeah.
unfortunately, yeah, Casey did a lot of great stuff. He was a better double for the
Mm.
close-up stuff than I was. I'm a little thicker. But no, this unfortunately was me. And this was the last thing I did, the very, very
Okay.
last thing I did. And I'm supposed to jump up and hit my head on a branch for real. And then I was told by the director, the first thing I want to see hit the ground is the back of your head. And
Mm.
I did it I did it 9 times. I don't know why, because it felt just as bad every time. Even the local paramedics felt bad for me, but it's okay. Yeah, it's definitely was a hard hit. Yeah.
So you jump up here, and then you get the great, great cutting between the stuntman and
Yeah.
the star. He doesn't. He looks like he was like, oh, it's just a little. It's like a cartoon bump for him as opposed to the 9 bumps for you.
Yeah.
And so then the horse runs off, and this next one, I might be able to play just a second of this, but he
This is
jumps.
Casey. Yeah, this
This
is
is
Casey's.
Casey.
Yeah, we called it Casey's Rock because we would
Casey's
go back
Rock.
over there several times because it's almost impossible shot. Because you'd have to literally land on Richard, who's riding the horse, to
Yeah.
land behind the saddle, and it was so hard. They finally got it, but it was hard.
Yeah, that seems like just again, that's like just a very hard stunt to do. And then in terms of, so who's this guy? I've always wondered, this guy seems like he takes a little bit of a bump too going down this hill.
This is
Is
Richard
this
Boer. Richard Boer's going down the hill as one of the soldiers. Yeah, it was
gotcha?
it was it was a huge fall. He's
Do you
actually
guys have to draw
yeah.
straws for that one?
No, he wanted to do it. Yeah, that'd be cool.
Y'all are wired differently.
Yeah, he breaks his back later in the movie.
Oh wow.
Coming out, he doubled when Jack comes out of the ore car and broke his back. He didn't know it till 4 months later when he's back in the States. But yeah, it was a hard hit, very hard hit.
You know, it's funny you say you guys are signing up for it, or you know, you wanted to do it. There's another movie. Again, it's very little known here. It's called The Fall Guy, I think, that I watched probably 15, 16 years ago. But it's a whole movie about it's a Japanese movie, Japanese stunt guy who's basically everyone in his life is begging him not to do this stunt where he falls down like 1,000 stairs or something. He's like falling down like, 100 stairs. Everyone's like, you're gonna break your neck. And so the whole movie is just built around basically like him saying like, no, I got to do it. And then everyone's like, please don't do this. And then he does it, and you see it at the end of the movie. I will try to rewatch it again.
Did he break his neck? Does he break his neck? Don't want to ruin it for everybody, but
I can't remember, to be honest with you. Yeah, I just remember the stunt because it's like he's fallen down. It's like I think the stuntman or the actor, legitimately, I think does it, and they do it in sort of one wide take where you just see the whole entire stairs, and he's just going it down, and it's just like, good Lord, they set it up.
Wow.
So this guy wanted to do. Okay, so
Yeah.
this guy wanted to do it. Then the horse runs out. I love even just the little cuts in here that they do with the horses. I'd be curious for this. So was this one of your horses that you had trained?
No, this is actually a horse. Yeah, the horse that's doing this sequence right here was trained by Gordon Spencer. They had a couple of different Toronados, and this was the least likely horse because he did the rearings. He did a lot of the tough stuff. He broke through the door. He did the rearing in the bunkhouse, and he also did this. I released this horse to the trainer, and the worst, obviously, I mean, what I meant to say was the worst job in Hollywood is to hold the Liberty horse. That's the worst job because if anything goes wrong, it's your fault. Doesn't matter what it does. But this horse actually loved Gordon. And I loved when I watched Gordon working because he invited the horse right into his space and would let him put his mouth down in the carrot bag, the little chum bag. So the horse just loved him. The horse's past experience he'd been in a wreck as a driving horse. So he had a few things that he didn't like, things down around his legs. So this is a perfect example of how a horse that maybe has had past trauma or bad experiences in life comes out and winds up being the star of the show. This horse was an amazing horse. This horse ran, I don't know, I think 3 football fields away.
Oh, wow.
He called this horse on the radio and then kept calling him until the horse could hear him again. So it was incredible. Yeah, it was pretty incredible.
Wow. So then we see him go through, and then they feel like at this time they're noticing, oh, there's no Zorro on that horse, and then they see, and then
That's Jason Rodriguez that I'm kicking. He now does a lot of the Taylor Sheridan shows. He coordinates a lot of those. He's doing the Yellowstones and the 1883s, 1923s, and all those right now.
Those are another two, when we were talking about modern westerns. Hell or High Water, Taylor Sheridan.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So when you're doing this, I guess you're starting on the other side of the horse, and they kind of hide it here, and then it's just like it's almost like a horror movie moment where it's like now you're coming over and kicking the guy in the head.
I think we spoke about the special saddle I'm using here. I had to hang down extremely low because they had kind of a high angle. The cut before this is a higher. They're looking down over the horse, and you don't see me. And then so I had to be extremely low. So then I come up over the saddle and I kick him in the face, which is actually just kicking in the camera, of course, because I'm just right next to the camera. And I'm just trying to kick the lens without kicking kick the lens, but don't hurt the camera. Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chad, how many sit-ups could you do at this point? Because I'm trying to imagine doing this with my abs at any point in my life, and I just feel like I'd just throw up or something.
you just have to remember that because of my father, I've learned to use the power of the horse. So that's right. Yeah, that 1,000-pound I picture where I want to go, and then I just don't picture anything keeping me from being there. And I use the timing of the horse because every single stride for an instant you're weightless.
Mm.
on a horse because of the power of them coming off the ground, and that's the timing in which we use to go to where we want to be next.
Would you compare that to like I guess the moments where you get weightlessness on like a roller coaster, like sort of how they do, like if you're going up and like you're going over a turn,
Mhm.
like is it kind of the same?
You don't get that kind of a feeling in your stomach, but and it's not. I think a roller coaster would be more of a gradual, up and down over. This is more of an instant punch.
Mm.
So the power of the horse coming off the ground is more of a
Mm.
constant. And it's the beautiful thing that I can say is it's not a mystery.
Mm.
You mentioned before it is like the counting is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. It doesn't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's very consistent. So once you learn how to count out loud and you get in time with the horse, then you have all that power at your disposal to use. You just have to be in the right position to get the best leverage to use it. And you mentioned before that riding is hard. We teach that riding, if you can count to two, you can ride
Mm.
because 1, 2 becomes right, left. Horses don't go up and down, and they don't go forward and back. They simply rock right to left. And once you learn what's going on, we have the actors and the stunt people learn to sit. All forms of riding teach you how to get away from the motion of the horse. I teach you basically how to be with the motion of the horse. So there are hind legs. If you're stepping in your stirrups as our hind legs are stepping on the ground, then you become seamless. You won't move.
Mm.
But it takes practice. That's
Yeah,
just the little secret. So if you can count to two, you can ride.
that gives me a lot of confidence. Yeah, I'd
Good,
like to.
good.
So you jump at the camera, you kick, and then you
Mhm.
go into the iron. This is the Iron Cross.
This was a really tough. This is a tough one here because my wrangler, my best friend Dave, Craig Davis, he would ride the horse on my left, on camera right. He
Mm.
would ride with me, and then I would, as soon as I would ride the other horse, I would get down in position, and he just had to step off and eat it. And all the other wranglers are going, "What in the heck is that?" Because wranglers just have to hold your horse and all that stuff. And we called it extreme wrangling because there was no other way for me to get both horses in position because we're behind a shot maker at this point, just really hauling buns.
Mm.
And so I get down into the iron cross to hold it, but because they used such a tight shot, never used a wide shot, I literally could have just been standing in the stirrups. But I
Mm.
actually did do the iron cross on him, and then I had to let go of one and then reach over and grab to get back on. So
So I was curious, and then again the great cut with Banderas is really
yeah,
he's really
that's
straining
right.
here,
Yeah,
but then you jump back up. But so I was wondering about this because to your point, you don't see the wide shot, so your
I
feet are
know.
not in the stirrups
They're
here.
not touching the ground. They're not touching the ground.
Okay,
And they're
how,
not
how do
touching
you
the
do
stone.
this then? Like, are you just holding on with your arms, or
Yeah, yeah.
gotcha? So that's like
At that point, I was in pretty good shape. I had shoulders back then.
that's like a gymnast move, like
Yeah,
when
it
they're
is.
on the rings, which I
I
think they
think
called
that's.
an
I
iron
think
cross too, right?
Yeah, that's exactly why they incorporated it in. They love that. They use that specific move in the storyboards, trying to prove, it's kind of a really unique thing. I've never seen it. Iron cross
Hmm.
between two running horses and then recovering.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's so I'm going back to the history of this. I remember when we talked before. Um, you had mentioned that like when I'd asked you about Yakima Canutt of Stagecoach, which I have back there. That you have there's the his. I was curious of like about how much of like the movie history of stunts sort of informed the later generation. I mean, one obvious thing that you can point to when we were talking about Glenn Randall is in Stagecoach is a stunt that Yakima Canutt does where he goes under the stagecoach and under the horses, and they do that same stunt in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and it's very much like an homage.
It is.
When I was watching Stagecoach, I noticed there's a part, I think, when he's in between the horses that are connected to the stagecoach, where he maybe does a little bit almost of an iron cross, but I think his feet might be in the stirrups. So I was curious, was that brought up at all during like the production of this or during the storyboards? Oh, we're trying to call back to this, or is this just like you've already have been doing the Iron Cross from your trick riding career, and it's just like
No, I'd never done this. It was in the storyboards, and I received a complete set of storyboards, and there was only a couple I had to change. They had me doing a flip from the back of the horse and do a full flip and land forwards in the saddle, which it's not really possible. I can get there, but it's more of a rolling move. You know what I mean?
mm,
So I decided to separate it and land backwards in the saddle. I pitched them. I would land backwards in the saddle, and then I would move up and reveal the other rider, who would then look over at me, and then I'd punch him. It was funnier
mm.
to be backwards. You know what I mean? To reveal into the frame. So
Yeah,
I pitched that because the other one wasn't physically really possible. And there's other options I could have given them, but I thought that one, I pitched that and they liked it. So we kept that one in the Iron Cross. As far as I know, I've never seen it or, but I don't think they mentioned stage. And maybe they saw that. I don't know. But there was no discussion with me about it. But when I saw
interesting.
that, I practiced at the house, a lot, and I found I could hold it for about 6 to 8 seconds, and then I couldn't keep the horses from outrunning one another. I could
Mm,
hold them together, but this trick I knew I could do because I normally do a shoulder stand in between two running horses while I'm Roman running. So I stand up on two horses and dive into a shoulder stand. So I knew I could balance and hold it there, hold the horses together. I wasn't able to hold them from outrunning one another, so it puts you more sideways. And at some point,
fascinating.
you have to let go. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. Okay, so you do the iron, and then you hop from. So how are you getting back up here? Is it are you just hoisting yourself up?
Yeah, well, you can say there, I've got a hand on both horse and I vault back over onto one of them.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
What are
And
you grabbing
then I let
onto? Is
go.
this part of like the saddle that you're
Yeah,
that you're?
they're horns. They're special horns. I still have these saddles. My mom covered our trick riding saddles with
Mm,
a cover that looks very much similar to the military cut that they had on the federales. So my saddles, they don't scream trick riding saddle, especially saddle. And then we put fake swords on them. We put, we doctored them up to make them look as much like the saddles that were in the sequence as we possibly could. And I still have these saddles with the same covers on them now. Pretty cool.
fascinating.
I've kept them the same.
That's so cool. So now you.
Same with the Roman pads. Same with the Roman pads. When I stand up on them, they're
Mhm,
Roman pads that are flat with no saddle. We put fake stirrups on them, and then just right there you can see if you look, there's a horn,
mhm.
a tall horn on that saddle. Whereas you see the other riders, you don't see that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And then I think here there's also these two hooks, right? Which I remember now. Is this something I was curious? Were these two backwards hooks? Were these part of? And I can't remember if this was your mom was famous for a trick. I think it was called the Ted Elder Suicide Drag, correct? If
Oh,
I'm
you're
trying to
talking
remember
about
the name.
yeah. What I'm holding on to are called croupers because
Croopers.
the work out the back end of the horses. They are land about where the croup of the horse is, so they're
Mm,
called croupers. And these would be what we use for any crooper work. But the Ted Elder is actually there's an additional strap that gives you a little more of an extension
mm,
that you use. It gets you into the trick. I used to do it when I was about 14. And then but it's a long ways back to the saddle because
mm.
the more grace you give yourself on one side, the more you've got to get back to the other side. But yeah, my mom did that trick. She was very famous for the under the belly and the Ted Elder suicide drag. But there would be an additional strap with a little bit of an extension for the Ted Elder. These are just the two handholds on the back of the saddle, which I mentioned before. The European riders didn't have. The Russian
Mm.
Cossacks don't have it. They have a bar, but they don't have these kind of Cooper handholds. So they weren't able to do some of the things that my dad did. That's tail stands and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So we get to the. I mean, that's probably the coolest. It's the coolest horse stunt I think in any movie. I'm just gonna.
Yeah,
I
that's the
know. I
part.
know you won't. You may or may not say that, Tab, but I'll say it for me in the audience that this is. You know, it's just wow, jaw dropping every time you see that.
Well, I just love seeing my horses every time. I know how much pain and effort. I remember that we went down there. We were supposed to be there for 2 weeks. We were there for 6 weeks because the director would only shoot in full light. And so
Yeah.
we all had sore necks from looking up at the clouds because after about 2 o'clock, I mean, Mexico City gets really, really cloudy. So we would just shoot in windows. We'd sit there for 30, 40 minutes, maybe longer, waiting
Mm.
for just a few, literally, less than a minute of sun. So that's what took the sequence so long. It was like took forever. Yeah, but anyway, we
Yeah.
got it. Yeah, full sun.
You're like a you remind me of like again I watch a lot of hockey. You remind me of a hockey player where it's just like you say well you'll see a hockey player do something amazing. They'll deke between three guys. They're like, well, it was a great pass by my teammate. And like I know
Yeah.
it's these horses are incredibly well trained and like as you said you had the perfect horses at the perfect time. You've repeated that over and like
Mhm.
you're also complimentary,
Yeah.
but it's just like just trying to get you halfway through.
Well,
It's
this mare right
you know,
here is actually the daughter of one of the black mares I ride. So that's Wiki, and she's actually a daughter of one of the black mares that I stand up on. So it is
interesting.
pretty cool to see them. Yeah, it's like your
Even
family's
your
on
horses
film.
are a
You
family
breed in.
affair. You know, you got
Exactly.
you and your mom and your kids and your your dad, and then also
Yep.
the horses. That's crazy.
I'm pretty blessed.
Yeah. So you go backwards on that, and you are right. It is funnier that it is. I mean, this is a bit of Jackie Chan almost. You know.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Times it right, and then you get back on it. And I love, honestly, one of my favorite, the look on your face here. You know, you give like a very like
Well,
you
this
just
is,
you
yeah, this
see
is
a
where
little bit of a
Antonio
smirk.
doubled me because I holler and I scream and I charge forward, and that's where they got into Antonio. He watched me do that, and then he would go, yeah, and he'd shake his hands, and he used basically like right there, you see him going, yeah, that's cool.
So then you get up, and then for the audience, this is called Roman riding, right? Where you're on top of.
Mhm.
Is it Roman riding on one horse or two, or are they both
Well,
Roman riding?
this would be a slick stand. Standing
Okay.
on one is a slick stand, and then I jump over onto the two, which becomes Roman riding because it comes
Mm,
from the Roman games where they used to Roman race around the Circus Maximus around the arena.
mm.
They do the
So
chariots and the Roman racing. So Roman riding digs, that's when everybody, what they pay attention to Roman riding is it pays tribute back to the Roman games.
this is an art that's like 2,000 years old or something.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's crazy.
And all new
Yeah.
again, kind of like the reason why they use horses in film.
Yeah.
Horses elevate your hero to another level and also gives that hero a perspective above everyone else. And that's why they use them in car commercials and everything else. They just
Yeah.
horses personified so much. When you said I called them the noblest creature on earth, they're also a noble throne. You can throw a guy on a horse and all of a sudden he becomes a king, if you
Yeah.
tell the story right.
Absolutely. In this one, I just got to ask, how did you do this? So you're jumping from one horse to another. This
Yeah,
almost seems as crazy. I mean, we're gonna go through. We talked about the jumping over the limb, but how'd you do this one?
it's all in timing. Every single, and there's also a little bit of commitment needed that you have to just know you're going to make it, but
That's one word for
also
it, Ted.
if I'm, well, that, in the fact that I knew this was a major, that I needed air. I needed to not crawl. I mean, I could have ridden up there and grabbed onto the guy and crawled across there, but this is what Zorro would do. So this is what you do.
Mm. So I was curious about this this stunt. Like when you're working with these stunt guys, like what's the rehearsal process for? Like I'm assuming you and these stunt guys get very friendly because it's such like a high risk, like planned thing. You got to tell them like, okay, you guys need to maintain this speed. I'm this speed. Like, how
Jeff,
do you? Yeah.
let me tell you what really happened. These guys show up, they're career stuntmen. I'm the new guy. Like, who's this guy on these two fat black horses? What does he think he's going to do? And so I try to explain to them when they're riding the Roman team that they need to pull their leg back, because I'm going to jump over there. I'm going to pull them apart and they have to fall off. And so I told them, trying to be helpful, that a lot of times the Roman riding horses run so close together, they trap your leg in between them. And they looked at me like, hey, we've done this before. Yeah, we're good. Just do your thing. I go, okay. And I mean, we're great friends now, but it was the funniest first day ever because in this scene, when I jump over there and we cut to me, slapping their heads and then throwing them apart, the very first time they did this, they get right here. Well, you don't see it, but right here, when they went out the horses, they both just went slowly, 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 slowly to their heads because their
Mm.
leg was trapped on the inside. The two horses were pushing together, so they couldn't fall off. So they
Oh.
literally fell in slow motion. I think one of them was knocked out and the other guy was all skinned up. But the very next time we got back on, after we woke him up, they're battling to get their legs, like in the proper position so they don't get pinned again. And we didn't have to have any more long discussions after that. I think I proved my point that whatever advice I was giving them was meant, with the best of intentions.
If I
But
see a guy doing backflips on horses, somersaults on horses, jumping off horses, I'm like, I'm probably going to listen to that. I know these guys have probably have tons of experience. You're friends with them and everything, but I'm probably like, I should maybe at least listen, even if he's the new guy, If he's
well,
willing to do
I
that.
think they had to learn that lesson one more time.
Yeah.
But it was good. They did great. Yeah, it was really cool.
So I mean, this is just incredible. The balance to land on that, and then,
Well, that was
yeah.
actually easy because I had two guys to hang on to once I landed. I knew I could go big because I knew I had somebody to grab if I had to.
I'll make a note that this is easy to, to
Well,
put for one horse. Yeah. I know what
well,
you're saying, but it's just so crazy to think about, that.
Well,
It
that's where you have to
shows the mastery.
understand. I brought the horse kind of in toward them at a greater rate of speed, so I was basically passing them gradually. So it gave me all the inertia I needed to get to where I wanted to go to next. But these are the things that you kind of develop in training. I couldn't just run beside them and jump with her. I needed to be gaining on them and also coming kind of at them. They gave me the freedom and the liberty and the confidence to jump that big, so to speak.
Awesome. That's so cool. So then we see in terms of so Banderas he down with you at all? Like when they filmed this, is he on like a truck or something or a
He's
flatbed?
on the back of a shot maker standing on two barrels, two
Okay,
55-gallon drums. Yeah.
that's
And
cool.
yeah, and they're shooting, they have a Tecton crane off the back and they're shooting up at sky.
Gotcha. Very cool. So then we cut back to you, and
Now that
and
shot, you're gonna miss that shot right there. That was one of the hardest shots in the whole movie. The horse
interesting.
is revealing over camera because imagine where camera had to be.
Oh, I didn't even think about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The original idea was to stick a camera on a 20-foot stick on a shot maker. And
Oh my
then I get
goodness.
just as, and I said, well, if I lose it, you guys are gonna run over me. And they said,
Yeah.
well, you figure out another way of doing it then. So it was actually my good friend Craig Davis said we strapped the camera to his chest, and he got on a moped and he went as fast as he could. And then I just ran over him. But I think you can see in there that there's stirrups are missing. There's no stirrups this time because the first time I rehearsed it, I went over the top of him at great speed, and we both looked down and we saw the stirrup go on the handle of the motorcycle at the same time.
Oh
And I
goodness.
just, yeah, I wadded him up and then I fell on top of him, and it was a big mistake. No
Oof.
stirrups on the inside next time.
Yeah.
So
Lesson learned.
yeah.
That's
But anyway,
crazy.
that was over my friend on a motorcycle with the camera on his chest.
Now I'm curious. We'll talk about this. After we go through this scene. But you have pioneered a system called the Steedycam, which we'll come back to. Which the Steedycam for the viewers will go over. But it's a way to basically it's kind of like a steady cam on a horse. If I had to describe it,
Mm.
it's if you were doing this scene again, it almost seems like would this be something that you might want to do with the Steedycam? Like because when you just was thinking when you just said like it's dangerous because you might get run over if you fall, but then one of the benefits I guess maybe of a Steadicam or something is like if you have a horse maybe you'd be able to avoid it potentially. Like is this the type of thing that might be safer with some of the stuff you've innovated?
Absolutely. We're the proper tool to have next. The closest thing to the actor on a horse is with another horse, because also it's like if we're a great pilot and we're filming a dogfight, we know if the dogfight's okay or if it's gone badly, when to abort.
Mm.
And we can also talk directly to the actor. So basically, what we're doing is we're filming horses and from horse-drawn vehicles. And so there's nothing that our horses can do with the camera systems that the actor's horse can't react to in
Mm.
the same time. Unlike if you match it with a motorcycle, a side by side, Cayenne, Porsche, or a trophy truck, these drivers of these vehicles, although they do a great job, they're more for us farther away and for greater speed. We're the tool where we get in tight and close. We don't get the look of the horse like he's scared of the electric bike or the side by side. He's not looking at this whole package. He's just looking at a horse next to him or a horse-drawn vehicle next to him. And so we still leave the camera, the shot, and not the camera, but the shot is still in the hands of the paddle and wheels of the operators. We just land the camera safely where it needs to be next to the horse, and that's why it's called Steadicam. And we developed the safety systems for the actors, like on John Wick, and we also developed the camera platforms, whether it's a 7-foot jib with a camera's heavy package on the back of it, or there's actually a robotic arm that comes off the back of my saddle. And what's cool about that is I become the final isolator for the camera. So it's got 3 pounds of positive pressure that wants to pick it up, and I just hold it down into the proper position. So that's the thing that no one could ever do. On
Mm.
Zorro, there's some shots in here where I do a POV of Zorro's POV with the horse's head in front of me. And that was probably a 35, 40-pound camera on my chest, trying to be as steady as I could.
Mm.
And so I've always done all the movies I've ever done. I've been handed a bucket with a camera in it or a stick with a bucket. We finally did the R&D to be able to place it on our horses in a stabilized in a mannerism to where, we did the R&D that no one else has the time or the money to spend on it. So we just went
Mm-hmm.
ahead and did that.
That's so fascinating. Yeah, I mean, this is again, such a cool shot, and I'd love to see. I didn't even think about having. I mean, it's one of those movie magic things. You don't think about like, oh yeah, you're having to sort of widely go over a camera here,
Yeah.
but
Well,
the
that
craft of
was the
that,
reveal shot of that's the reveal shot, the one they had to have. I got that shot. I had a few weeks off, so I went back to Vegas to perform at the Excalibur, and then I ripped, really, really ripped a groin muscle badly. And the next day they called me and said they need to do this shot again. And I don't know why, but they had to, it was fuzzy or, wasn't in focus. And I went, you got to be kidding. So we went back and we did it again, but I couldn't even walk at the time. It was crazy. But yeah,
yeah,
why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't it happen like that? That's the way it happens.
yeah. This pose seems a bit hard to do if you're having a groin injury.
Well, you can see how we talked about earlier how they kind of sped this film up. If you watch it in real time, you'll notice how it's kind of over, undercranked.
Hmm.
But you'll see the tails of these horses, they're flat out. So they're running as fast as they can go. So that
Mm.
was the only thing for me that was a little bit, but I understand why they did it. Because they wanted
Yeah,
to look the old Zorro movies. Yeah. And I'm
and so
actually
then
I'm going over Casey right there, who's the other double. That's funny
so
how we teamwork, yeah.
it's interesting. So it's Zorro going over the other Zorro. I mean,
Yeah,
because he's the one who jumped
exactly.
on the horse, right? And he's also in the when the for the viewers in the opening scene when Zorro goes up the steps
Yeah,
and he's rearing back the horse, and you get the famous Zorro with the sunset behind him. That's Casey.
that's
And so
Casey, yeah.
Casey's also here, right?
Yeah, it's Casey there. Absolutely. Now Casey doubled Tom Cruise a bunch too, and also he did the Last Maverick. He coordinated
Mm.
that, so he's going to become very successful. Um, I remember this shot. I had to do this shot. It kind of came up as a surprise. Nobody was ready to shoot this sequence, right? I
Hmm.
mean, I don't know. It wasn't on the shot list. Wasn't on the call sheet. So when they pivoted to this shot, I called Craig, who was down at the horse trailer. I said on the radio, I told them to tell them, please bring me my cup, because I have to do this stunt. And so
Yeah.
we're waiting and we're waiting, and the director's getting all pissed off because we're waiting and we're losing sun. And all of a sudden, this car comes roaring up to the side of us and jumps out, and the guy hands me my cap. I go, I lost a lot in translation. I guess we got to go
Yeah.
for it anyway. Anyway, that was just one of those. You always
You
want to
need
know
a,
the tidbits of the movie. So
yeah,
these are the actual
absolutely.
tidbits of the movie, I guess, so to speak.
You need a lot of trust in Casey then. I mean, that's
Yeah.
so the yeah. So then you're back on the Roman riding, and then we see, he's looking back. The horses. I love the look on this guy's face. I always forget the actor's name, but he's in a bunch of movies in the '90s. Then we
Yeah,
see,
exactly.
yeah, we see you turning, and now when you're doing, I was curious. So we're about to see you jump over this, and so we pan into the thing. Is this one continuous shot? Like, is this the actual approach that you are using, like
Yeah.
here to actually
You see,
jump over it?
you see the speed. Now I don't know
Yeah,
which one it is. I couldn't really come in that fast and stop the horses right in front of the tree because that's them training the horses.
yeah,
So they filmed that out there. I'm not sure if it was I mean, if I'd have been on the other side, you could have seen me do the whole approach and the jump. You know what I mean?
yeah.
But I think I don't want to speak for Fernando Jr., but I think he was set up for cutting it into two pieces like this in case it failed. He'd have something to use. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? If you
You
just,
know,
you know what I'm saying? If he's over there, can see the whole thing, he's kind of stuck with the master. Whereas if he
yeah,
shot it like this and the tree obliviates me for a second, and then I just come into frame already in the air, then he's
hmm,
got something he can cut to, even if it's just me sitting down later on a horse or something. You know what I mean?
yeah,
I don't think he had a lot of confidence that this was actually going to really work.
yeah.
Um,
And now I
so
feel
if you
bad
can
for looking at
imagine,
this in slow. Oh, go
yeah,
ahead. Sorry.
I was just say now you can see the distance from my horse's back
Yeah. So
to,
now I feel bad for saying that, like, oh, this seemed like you weren't getting as much height as you're getting a crazy amount of height here. So now I feel really. I think it's
that's
just
okay.
like I like when you're processing. Like I see, it's like you're seeing, kind of like you're almost. I'm sort of like almost anticipating, or not anticipating, but like kind of perceiving it as this. But then if I'm able to try and pause it, like
You see,
this
that's
is
not a
like a
branch.
skate
You see
jump.
that, yeah. You see, that's not a branch. They said originally, "Can you jump over a branch?" I go, "Yeah, I think so."
That's a
And
limb.
then they fell a tree. I'm going. When I first got there, the tree was so high that it was literally at my eye level, and I was thinking, why wouldn't Zorro just duck and go under it? I don't know why we had to dig that thing down. We were by ourselves for 2 weeks, literally Craig and I, we had to do this all by ourselves. It was 2 hours out of Mexico City. So we dug that tree down to get it to the level we wanted to get it to where we could practice and rehearse the jump. It was pretty funny.
Mm. Yeah, especially I mean when you're thinking, because you're sort of somersaulting and you're sort of more on the side. It's like, yeah, you maybe could have gone on the side of the horse here, but
Mm.
I think at
You
this point
can't.
Zorro's just showing off.
By the time I committed, the thing that made it the most difficult is it was a right-hand turn. They found a tree
Hmm.
and dug a road around it downhill. You see me
Yeah,
entering to the right. I'd always practiced in a straight line. I'd never had to negotiate keeping the horses on the all the horse people out there will appreciate this. I had to keep the horses on the left lead while bending them to the right, and they had to be perfectly in stride, 3 strides before the tree because I had to throw the reins down, load, and then jump on the third stride. And they had to be perfectly in sync or I couldn't make it.
yeah,
And then by that time I couldn't jump down because there wasn't time to I only could jump up even if I had to hit the tree because I couldn't jump down because I would have hit my head. So
mm,
that's kind of the position we were in.
absolutely. Yeah, I noticed this when I was playing this sort of back over and over editing for the pod is that as you were saying, you're coming around a bend and then almost a slight. It's a curve here, right? And
Mm.
that's, I
Yeah.
mean,
There's a
goodness, that
photograph that Casey took the greatest picture of this. He was at the end of the run and he took a great shot. And you'll see me in the air aiming left because
yeah,
I not only have to jump up, but I have to land where they're going to be next, which is
hmm
way to the left. The first time I jumped up, the horses weren't there anymore because they turned left and I didn't figure that one out. And this is where I started learning how to think things out a little bit better.
mm. Yeah, it's great. And then you do a little move like you're landing for it seems like maybe a half second, and then you're pivoting
Yeah,
to one horse.
I landed on 2 and then I went to 1 because that's what the thing called for.
Yeah,
Land on 2, then I sat down on a 1, and then I think we go to the transfer over 2, and then that's what the thing called for
yeah.
or hoped for.
And that is this you or Casey doing the big
This
bump
is
here.
that's Casey. That's Casey. Yeah, doing the
Now
dead
that
band.
seems like it's going pretty fast.
Yeah. Well, it was. If you just look at the horse's tail, you can tell. That's how you change. That's how you tell is how
Yeah,
long the strides are. If the tail's straight out and the mane's up in the air, that is how you read the speed. You know
yeah.
what I
You can
mean?
see in this frame here that tail's pretty straight there.
Yeah.
Were his
Yeah.
ribs okay? Like, how do you is he
No,
wearing like a chest protector here?
well, he's on a dead man, so he comes in and hits the end of a line. So there's a line going up to a crane. So it's
Mm,
going to stop him, hopefully. I mean, I think he got into the tree a little bit. It's
hmm
hard to do those because if anything, if for any reason you are 2 or 3 inches too long on that line, you take the hit. You know what I mean? It
mm.
doesn't stop you in time. But no, he did great.
In this sort of reverse shot here, or is the horse like is this a separate shot or the same shot with multiple cameras of
Same
like the
shot,
horse going through
same,
there?
yeah, same camera. So that shot right there is almost the same camera angle that they used on my jump. They just
Mm,
went lower. They went lower to get more sky, but it's almost the
yeah,
exact same angle as the tree jump I did.
that's so crazy. We'll just take a look at one more of this. Yeah, coming in on a turn and you can see the balance. It's just so crazy. I can Do you look back at this stuff and you think, I know you're still doing it with the with your kids and you did it you grew up doing it, but you think like I know you said you love seeing the horses, but do you think like, man, this was crazy that I did this?
Uh,
Do you still have like a first person memory of this? Like when you like so can you remember like
yeah,
yeah.
every bit of it. I remember every bit of it. I remember how many days I drove past that tree because I had so much other stuff to do, and every day I had to drive past that tree and look at that tree, knowing that was still coming. And that's the epiphany of it's like, wow, I still have to do that. And I remember that is the anticipation, the struggle, and the relief. I did it in 2 shots. I
Mm,
worked on it for 3 months. I took I don't know how many falls trying to figure out how to do it, and it just finally came down to everything just had to work perfectly, or it wasn't going to work at all. There was no
mm,
way to practice it anymore that I could feel any more confident because I already by the time this happened. I knew everything I needed to know. Unfortunately, I knew too much to know it may not work. You know what I mean?
mm,
That's when you go, there are stunts that we go into knowing they're not going to work, but
yeah.
you're not going to be the one that says this is never going to work. So
Yeah.
you just got to go live through it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the tragedy of I remember when I was watching I don't have nearly the expertise in hockey as you do in horses, but I've been playing and watching hockey for all my life, and I remember watching with a friend who didn't they weren't as familiar with it, and they saw a hit and they're like, "Ooh, that looked like it really hurt," but it was a hit that was in the middle of the ice, and it's like those can hurt, but like it's not bad. The worst hits in hockey are when you're about 3 feet away from the
Yeah.
boards, because then you're going crashing into the boards. Like the boards, it's one of those weird things. Is like you want to use those as your friend. It's like because you can sort of defray the impact of it. But
Mhm.
I can imagine, yeah, the more you know about horses and the more you know about this, it's almost like, well, you also have a much clearer picture of what can go wrong. Which, yeah, the
Yeah,
fear of
well,
that.
this was the same thing. This is much like my friend that did The Knight's Tale. I said, if you live through this movie, you will be in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Knight's Tale, and it's true because he did the movie. He did a fantastic job, and now he's very successful in this business. But sometimes you just have. This is what you have to do to, if this is what you do, then you better bring your big boy bag and all your stuff, and you better give it your best performance. Because I've always found I've done many movies where I had one bad take, and that's the one they used. So
Mm.
I try never to give them a bad take if I can help it.
Yeah. That's yeah, I've heard of actors doing a similar thing on like directors who like a lot of takes, so that's interesting. It's
Yeah.
just never give them a bad take.
Try not to
Okay,
give
so
them a bad take because you might. I've had to watch it in the movie. I went, "Oh,
yeah. So we see that there's a great release here, and
yeah,
then you're switching horses one last time, and you're riding off here, and then you said so from this horse to this horse is a different one that
yeah,
you're.
that's a different one. Yeah,
Mm,
that was my Roman team. I switched over under her, and that's why they wanted me to go to those two horses I was riding. Supposedly were the Federales horses, and that's why
mhm,
it was so important for me to come down and go to one horse that was a Federale horse, and then that other horse just disappears because in the next scene I'm riding up next to Toronado, who got loose in the beginning. And
mm.
that's where I recaptured Toronado. So she was redressed. My right hand horse was redressed as Toronado. And then as soon as I jump over onto her, we cut to a shot of me going away from camera, which is the real Toronado horse.
Mm.
So that's one of my Roman teams there turning. And then the next shot is that's a Parisian that I'm riding up the hill on.
Awesome.
Movie
It
magic.
looks so
Movie
good.
magic.
Movie magic, and then the sky. I mean, this is a beautiful, beautiful sky. It looks like
Yeah,
an El
it's
Greco
gorgeous.
painting.
But you see how many clouds are there. So we're all like
Yeah,
looking, okay, maybe 30 minutes. Uh,
yeah. This sky, and then we talked about old westerns. The sky in the movie, the John Ford, one of the most beautiful westerns. My Darling Clementine,
mm.
is he's got some of the most gorgeous skies. Also, actually, in a movie, was this at the big studios in Mexico City?
Yeah, that's where they shot all the stage work. Yeah.
Gotcha. There's a movie The Fugitive, not the '90s one, but the 1947 one, which is it's kind of like almost like a Mexican drama western. It was shot by it was directed by John Ford and shot by Gabriel Figueroa, one of the great Mexican cinematographers, and they also have like sky like this. So it's
Mhm.
it's and I believe it was shot at those same Churubusco Studios in it was inaugurated in 1945, and so it looks like it's just in terms of movie history, right? It's like
Yeah.
50, I guess it'd be 50 years after they were shooting the same thing, probably on very similar locations.
Yeah.
So cool.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're back here, and Tad, I do want to thank you so much for going here or for joining us today. And I wanted to ask, so you are, let me make sure because I got the name. I also try and prepare a lot for the interview, but I think I said the company name wrong at the beginning of it. So it's a Tad Western production company, and you are part of Brand X Stunts. Is the only thing I forgot to write down in this interview. I have like a whole couple pages of notes, and
Oh,
everything.
that's
But
fine. No, I'm a member of Brand X, a proud member of the Brand X Stunt organization. They have like a Stuntman Association, Stunts Unlimited, Independent Stuntman Association, and Brand X Stunts. They're
mm,
we're on the premier groups. And then my company name is a Tad Western Production Company. You can just find it with atadwest.com.
mm-hmm.
And then we also have an actor and also stunt academy, action academy is called a Tad Western Action Academy. And then we train
Awesome.
a lot of actors and stunt people and proficient, people who want to become stunt people. We usually have at least 1 or 2 clinics a month. When I'm not in some foreign location doing something else, we try to have clinics.
So if you're listening to this and you're like saying, okay, I want to be a stunt man, or just like I'm an actor, or I'm making something like an independent feature and I want to get training on this, they can go to tadwest.com and just check out when a clinic is. They can go out and train with you.
They can definitely reach us. We do everything. We obviously do everything from music videos, and we do movies and all that stuff. We furnish livestock. We furnish stunt coordination. We have all the period costuming, so we can really turnkey a smaller Western production. And then we also train the actors, like whether it's, I don't get into name calling, but a lot of
Mm.
large A-scale actors come here and get comfortable on a horse. And then also, we have these action academies where we put you under the stress of being on a set and give you the tools you need to have to either, if you're just an actor and you want to have better auditions and be comfortable around horses, or if you're a writer and you want to become a stunt person, then we put you into the proper level. You almost have to go through level 1, 2, and 3. You have to go through level 1 because we go back and teach you all about the timing and how a horse moves, because that's the foundation for all of the stunt work that's made us successful. And
Yeah.
we have to understand the timing, where the power is coming from, and how to use it. And that's what makes everything look so effortless. And it's funny because you said the walls are your friend in hockey. I've learned that the ground is my friend. So
Mm.
the closer I can get to the ground before I have to initiate the fall,
Yeah.
then the less I'm falling. In other
Yeah.
words, when I get a shot, I take it, and there are 16 basic ways to fall off a horse. There's more
Yeah.
other ways, but I'm just saying there's 16 basic ways, 8 on each side. But if I can initiate the fall, take the hit, turn, and they're like in Ride of the Devil, they wanted it to be a Schindler's List. It was the hardest Western I've ever done
Mm.
because it was an Ang Lee movie, and then our coordinator, Mr. Doug Coleman, fantastic coordinator. But he wanted us to look like Schindler's List. It's just very hard to just take a hit and just fall off a running horse.
Mm.
So I found that the more I could take the hit and then look like I reached for my horse and then initiate the fall, but keep 1 foot on my step. And so the moment my gun was touching the ground, I could kick off that step and get to my back. I could look like I was dead before I hit the ground. But that's the kind of
Yeah.
details that we explain. And of course, in our academies, everyone goes into pads because obviously, if you can't hit a porta pitch, you can't hit your mark.
Mm. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
Yeah,
the it's I wouldn't have thought of that, but that I mean, definitely don't want to take a hit from 6 feet off the ground if you can take it from 2 feet off the ground, right? Like
yeah,
just in terms that
exactly.
makes total sense.
And we learn that from trick riding. We're in all these different positions, and something goes wrong, and we've got to let go and eject. And so you want to tap a toe and turn your head and get to your shoulder or whatever, push away
Yeah.
from the horse. So, it came from our other principles of riding. Like people say I ride English or I ride Western, and I just say I ride
Hmm.
because I use all those principles, dressage, English, Western, all the different styles of riding. I will use all of those in my tool bag to get me through sequences and stuff.
Yeah. That's so cool. And then taking whatever's like you said before, seems like taking like respecting tradition, but also like there are safer and probably better ways. And if you find a safer and better way in a just a more efficient way to do it, you do it, right? Just in
Yeah.
and especially a way that's more ethical for the horses, right?
Yeah, more
Yeah.
humane, less attempts. Um, Again, steps in tradition. Yet the ones I looked up to invented new stuff.
Hmm.
So it's my turn to take it to the next generation. Wrecking wagons, you can put back together in 15 minutes and do it again, as opposed to wrecking 3 different wagons that are never going to wreck the same way. I
Yeah.
can define mine and land the front of my wagon in a window if I have to, because I know it's something that's knowable. It's like math and physics. These things are real things. And if
Yeah.
we can, we use them, and we were talking about rigging, and we use them in cars. Speaking of, you said something earlier, and the first Fast and Furious, I know the gentleman, the great director that directed that, he said a lot of that movie was done at 35 miles an hour or less because camera could be so close to the situation. Whereas if you
Hmm.
go too fast, you have to initiate so far away. So getting back to it, it's about understanding camera. We horses are my forte. I also get to do semis and all the other things that it's afforded me to do, wreck semis and stuff. But horses are my main thing,
Hmm.
and so we developed the camera systems based on the way they move. What
Do
makes
you
it
mind if I
unique
share my
is
screen and show that
sure.
while you're talking? Because so let me just sorry to interrupt you, but I have the video pulled up. So Tad had sent me. This is this sort of something that you send to? Is it like studios or companies that you work with? Is kind of like an
Yeah,
overview?
there's several companies right now that are looking at because they have certain sequences that are only there's a 24 foot from lens to any motorized vehicle because 24 foot is only two strides, which is less than a second. So they don't want to put the vehicle too close, to they don't want to put the vehicle with the camera too close. Now on the top right hand picture. Galen's trick riding on that horse. We're right next to the camera vehicle, but even though he's not using his hands and stuff, I'm controlling the horse. So the
Mm,
horse is never not in under my control. So that's different than an actor running down there doing all this stuff on it out of control, and we're just chasing it with a camera vehicle. You know what I mean?
yeah.
That if that makes any sense, both systems are completely under control. And the one on the left, the smaller one over there with me riding, is basically one of the our arms that comes around the back of me, and it takes all the movement of the horse out, and then I literally just hold the camera with like 3 pounds of pressure going up. I just hold it down in the position I want. I become every camera system has all these isolators systems in it, and this system is all spring loaded and all that stuff. But basically, I become the final isolator.
Mm. And the results of it, you can see when you send it to me. The the like you can see just like sort of these test shots of how close. I
Mhm.
mean, this was wild to me. It's just like I was just like, why isn't that no one like? I know there, you obviously you work on tons of movies, like, and you're doing incredible stuff, and there's still great movies coming out. But these particular shots that I saw here, it's just like, man, these are so close, and like you can
That's what
see
we're
it.
going to be introducing.
Yeah.
We've not introduced this, industry wide,
Hmm.
because I'll be going through probably the safety coordinators and stuff like that. Because once they see the system, we're actually able to put you into the action, into the battle. So right now we've got a couple projects where there's a lot of big battle scenes and all this kind of stuff. And if I'm in there in costume filming from within the battle, or someone, one of not just me, but the ones that I have doing this, that puts you in the battle, and they can
Yeah.
keep shooting. Or if we put the camera system just on the horse, because there's systems that we have where we just release a horse from A to B
Hmm.
that's trained to go liberty from A to B, and the camera systems are shooting, and then the stunt people play off those cameras. They play off the cameras. Pretty cool stuff. I mean, I don't know how it wasn't invented 100 years ago, because it was just never really defined. And the
Hmm.
reason it works for us, Jeff, is because our horses are trained for trick riding, which means I didn't need to add the counterbalance to the camera systems.
Hmm.
If that makes any sense. Normally, when you have a camera system, you have to have the counterbalance.
Hmm.
And because our horses are trained to hold tricks on the side for a certain distance, like I say, I don't make at a high speed, I'll never do a shot more than a football field, because
Hmm.
that's typically how long we do a trick for. But I already know this is something we know how to do. So the horse can take the camera system and the weight of the rider or the length of a football field and be fine,
Yeah.
because that's what they're trained for. And that meant we didn't have to counterbalance all this stuff. And then when we get to the bigger camera packages, we use a single or a double team. We'll use jibs or multiple camera operators. Like you can go from a jib, like a stabilized camera shot, and then you can also have a Steedycam operator on board. And so as you're stopping with your shot, one shot's this, and then you slow down. So someone does a back over off of a horse, you can step right off into the shot. Steadicam operator can come right off the platform and push in on that.
Hmm.
So it gives you that seamless John Wick feel, like it's just super immersive, almost
Yeah.
like it's almost like AI, only better because it's real.
Yeah, the exhilaration of this, I feel like getting this close, as a somewhat of a camera nerd, from just shooting my own stuff and just trying to learn on it. It's like the sort of immediacy of like I don't know what are you filming on here, but like the shot that you can see like where you're doing the flip. I mean, it's the same trick that that you do in Zorro here. Maybe not this one, but one of these ones, you do on Zorro where
Yeah,
you
it's a
go back,
reverse Cooper. It's yeah,
reverse
exactly.
Cooper.
That's exactly the same trick, and it's just that I was right next to a big shot maker, and that was, you know, uh, that's where I had to be me because my
Yeah,
horses I could get him used. But if you were to try to throw this kind of sequence together without the very best trick riders and the best trick riding horses, it would be, it would be, I mean, it would be really quite unsafe
yeah,
for both. And so, because whoever's driving the shot maker or the camera vehicle, they can't be watching you at the same time and they're trying to drive down the road and they're just taking their commands over the headphones. So
yeah,
that's why we were doing all this close work. We're not replacing any of the other camera systems. We still need the side by sides. We still need the Russian arm and all the turret cars and vehicles. It's just that we're the ones that belong in here tight and close so that we can adjust instantly to whatever's going on.
yeah,
We know what we're looking at, and we know instantly how to help the actor or adjust the shot. If they can't make the correction, we can make the correction. And we also are able to put them on platforms where they're able to be on the horse and on safety belay while I'm controlling the horse, so they can just concentrate. They've never ridden before. They can concentrate on just giving the performance.
yeah. Yeah, I mean it's so cool. I mean, I think of it as like to me it was just almost like a palette of like when I see like an actor I like or like a camera lens, I'm like these are I get like it just opens up so much more you could do. And I notice on these things that like the amount of like just different lenses, like the using like an 11 or a 13 or something, or like an 11 to 14 lens or something like crazy wide angles because you can get so much closer. It just like it feels
And
like it just yeah,
you probably notice later when we do the beauty shots, we have the camera body, we have the lens sizes and all that stuff on the
yeah,
when you go to the beauty, yeah, that section there, that's all that's the rig, two horses, and then
hmm
we're rack focusing, we're reaching for things. We do full 360s around the riders where you normally have to build an entire, dolly system, and we're able to just wrap these shots in because that's the beauty of understanding how to give the correct direction to the riders and then
hmm
also having the correct operators. And then I'm literally just putting the camera with my little monitor. I see the size it needs to be, and I just put the camera in that position and I leave camera in camera. I'm not trying to jump onto the Steadicam system and ride around and get into that department. I'm simply facilitating putting the camera in the proper position in the most humane way possible. There was something we didn't say earlier I wanted to just go back and say, and that
hmm
is we talked about following horses. In the movies I do, I use the flipping horse a lot, the mechanical flipping horses. Um, and I just want to say I established real horses in the scenes, and then we flip the other mechanical horse through the scene or at you or away from you. But I've established it's a horse by using the real horses right up against it and next to it. So that's something we missed in our interview that I just wanted to make sure that your horse lovers out there know that a lot of the great falls with the huge impact shots from the movies I've done are not real horses. They're going to be mechanical horses that you think are real horses because I've established real horses in front of them or around them.
yeah.
That makes sense. Cool.
Yeah, and honestly, even something as like don't want to say as small as this, but something like this, like if you're trying to communicate, like I don't know what the right word is, but like livability, realness, or livability, like the fact that you're able to get so much closer, it's like this shot in particular is one of the ones I love the most because like you see a lot of these shots in older westerns, but it's very static because they can't, because they used like a wider, one, but like this, you're actually it's in motion and
Yeah.
it's just so tremendous on like on a 24 there. But that even helps like with the humaneness of it all because like if you are more real next to a horse in one shot than the following shot if you are using the mechanical one, right? It's like, well, you already have sort of you kind of earn, it's like a balance that you earn in a bank, right? Of like a, you're almost, I think I've always felt that like you just kind of earn more capital, so to speak, to like in terms of like if you see a shot that's so real and then the next one is like, not that even really people can tell, but this just helps with the
It's
believability, I think.
it's the same as jumping between Antonio Banderas and myself.
Hmm
It's the way you cut between the double and the actor. And right now we're cutting between the horse, which is giving your actor legitimacy.
mm
I always say the people that have to ride the mechanical horses in the movies, the ones that have to ride those, um, don't have the tools to sell to me that it's a real horse.
mm
They don't know how to manage their reins. They don't know where to look. They don't know how to gather speed. They don't know how to ask for more speed. They don't have those tools. It'd be like me flying a jet in a simulator, trying to look like I was a fighter pilot. I wouldn't even know where to look.
Hmm.
I mean, they would have to correct everything I did. And I've been in the truck when they're shooting the actors on mechanical horses because of the lighting and all this other stuff, or the fact they don't have time to prep them to know how to ride. But see, there's the problem. If you teach them how to ride really well, then you still have to shoot it somehow.
Mm.
And if you have to stay 24 feet back, it becomes so unstable. So that's
Right.
why Steedycam became important as the tool we're next to. And the beautiful thing about this is we have live input. We can be talking an actor through the shot, or we can also be telling them to relax. But the beautiful thing is the director can say, okay, have him look over his left shoulder. Okay, have him check his gun, see if he's loaded, if he's got bullets in it. Okay, put the gun away, pet his horse, look up at God,
Yeah.
and move out. So you can talk your way through a scene in which there's no other platform you can do that with,
Yeah.
on a real horse next to him. And we're also the ones that need to be there in case there is something that is off. We can immediately address it or fix it or abort,
Mm.
before anything becomes, because if you have imagine you have a vehicle running with a camera next to an actor on a horse, and they're going from A to B, and they're trying to keep a 3/4 back shot. Well, they just have to keep going faster if the actor can't control the horse, which means the horse is going to chase that car. But pretty soon they're both going just as fast as they can run, even though they had no intention of ever going that fast.
Hmm.
And we have no control at that point. We just have to hope that they get to the other end and we can stop them. So you see, I mean, that immediately that's one of the main things that we have. It's hard for an actor to act confident and like a hero if he thinks his horse is running away with it. So, you know what I mean? It's going to affect the performance. So we've
Totally.
taken into consideration all those things and all the things I've seen that didn't go well and the things I've seen go well. And then we've tried to figure out that we've got 7 right now, different camera platforms, um, all the way up to where it looks like a shot maker, and you can have 15 people sitting on there if you want to with a 25-foot crane. So we
Mm.
have the horsepower, so to speak. Like in this situation right here, I'm just to just show different happenings. I'm riding this horse, pulling this cart that has a stabilized camera system on the back because we just want to jump to it real quick. The rider's going to be behind that, but that can literally be unplugged and hooked behind a side by side instantly, and so you can go
Mm.
faster and not have to change camera positions. Understand? So that
Mm.
literally just goes into the back of a side by side from the horse to side by side for the wider, faster shot without
Mm.
having to retool or anything like that. So it's
So
pretty cool.
cool. Yeah. It's also amazing. So I'll put a link for
So
oh, go ahead,
it's
sir.
also patented. It's also patented. So
Yeah, it's
there you go.
also yeah, also patented. Honestly, it's one of those things where it's like, it's like if someone else could do it, it's like, I think there's the jazz musician Thelonious Monk. He's known for kind of playing very sort of oddly, like, and he deliberately learned to do it because he's like, he kept seeing people try and imitate it, but he's like, if I just play like this, then no one's gonna be able to copy me. So he's like, he tried to make it. It's like if someone could do any of those horse stunts or whatever, it's like I don't even think you need to worry about a patent because it's like,
Well,
I'm trying to
we
think of
worry
someone else who
about
can think of it.
we worry about misinformed
Mm,
imitate when they try to imitate what you're trying to do because we know it starts with the training of the horses.
right. To go
That's
back
where
to
it
the ethics
starts.
of it.
So yeah, it goes
Yeah.
back to the ethics of taking the time. And if I hadn't landed in Hollywood with trick riding horses from the live show experience, used to explosions and lasers and all that stuff, then I would have survived. It was just because I landed with the right package that happened to work instantly. They went right to work in this industry because they were used to all this stuff. I didn't have to go through this system. But I recognize the fact that the reason why these horses worked is because of the time we put in preparing them for trick riding
Mm,
and for those kind of shows. So now we take the same time to prepare them for Steedycam and for stunts. We take the time it takes, whether they pay for it or not.
hmm.
We may get 1 or 2 days of prep, but we'll prep for 2 or 3 weeks or whatever we need to do
Yeah.
because failure is not an option.
Yeah.
And, yeah,
And they're your horses, and it's a continuity thing, and
yeah,
yeah.
and we don't want we don't like to put our horses in a situation where they can fail.
Yeah.
That's
Absolutely.
just it, because that's my responsibility to make sure. Again, they're 8-year-old children that are working for free, so
Yeah.
that's basically what we're working with.
Yeah. I mean, it's so, I think one of the, as an animal lover, I've always had, cats and dogs growing up, and, have 3 cats. One of the positive things I think, like, everyone's always talking about everything's getting worse and blah, blah, blah. That's, you hear that. And I've never been like too much of a pessimist or, it's just like certain things are getting better, certain things are getting worse all the time. Right. But like one of the things I think has gotten a lot better is the way that people just sort of casually treat animals in America, in the world, and in terms of like, it's interesting that it matches the horses match sort of the way, 20 years ago, I remember growing up, people did not treat their pets the way that we treat them now. And the same seems like it's the same thing with the horses and everything else. You obviously, you seem like, because of your mom and your dad and your history, were on the, I guess, the leading edge of that. Kind of
Yeah, I
parallel
think we
home pets.
we probably gave horses souls a long time ago,
Yeah.
and that's what it gets down to. You can
Yeah.
either think of your pet as an animal, or you can think of him as a soul, and
Yeah.
that's how you kind of separate the two. We're just in this situation where they're our family. We try to take the best care we can of them. I always find that 99% of the problems we have with horses is not putting them in a position, both mentally and physically, to do what it is that we're asking them to do next. So I've had to get better and learn more ways to ask.
Mm.
And that's what I always tell my new students: quit telling you, don't kick my
Mm.
horses. You're just like kicking an 8-year-old child. I
Yeah.
know the script calls for it sometimes, and I get it. And I just try to talk the director out of it by giving them another option. But my point is, kicking does not make you look like a hero. It just
Yeah.
looks like because if you really know how to ride, they know when you're asking them to go. You don't,
Mm.
then I'd rather, so my point is, we have to learn just the best horsemen always have more, they always ask more than one way. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So I always tell my students, if I slap you and then say duck, that's rude.
Yeah.
So I go, and whoa, and walk, and trot. And the inflection changes, but I give them a chance to react. I always say it's like the soccer referee. All the parents stand up and scream, and he looks at you and goes, "You have to give me enough time to inhale before I can blow the whistle." I love that.
Yeah.
So the same thing,
Absolutely.
we have to give the horses enough time to get 1,000-pound body in place to react to what it is that you're asking for next.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, I mean, it's so impressive. Well, Tad, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. I honestly could probably ask another 6 hours of questions. So,
Well, I don't know if
thank-
I have that much information, but I just wanted to say it was a pleasure, Jeff, because
yeah.
a lot of stuff comes across the desk, and a lot of movie industry gets a bad rap, and it was really, really nice to see someone that actually took the time, digested it, and just kind of like a lot of the points you hit on were really well done. So I don't do this very often. This is the first blog I've done, so I just want to say thank you very much, and I'm very pleased that you reached out, and thank you. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so. I mean, this is a dream come true. I mean, if you would have told, not to date myself, but 7, 8-year-old, 9-year-old me that I'd be talking to the guy who's on the horses in the Mask of Zorro, it'd be like, come on, like that'd be a dream. So one of my
It's
favorite. I've
funny.
probably seen that movie. Gosh, 100 times. I think just growing up, watched it, and then just recently, every couple years, going back to it. So yeah,
I haven't I,
yeah.
I haven't even seen it 100 times, so you're way ahead of me.
Yeah, it's I probably, and I'm probably on the underwatch compared to some of the audience. That was one of the things I was really, just how much people love the movie, how much people love practical effects, how much people love proper horsemanship and getting to know this stuff. And yeah, I mean, I think it's just happy to have you on and hear you talk about it, and I know everyone else will too.
I think you're right about the fact that the way we've evolved into treating our pets makes you appreciate the movie more.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? I think
yeah,
that now looking back on it, people recognize, that's some good stuff. I mean, as far
yeah,
as the horses are concerned, the stunts are only possible if in that level, if you're on great horses.
yeah.
That's why I say that people always, I said, no, no, it was all fun and good. But I couldn't do it today, and I couldn't have done it 10 years before that. It had to be on those horses at that time.
Yeah.
That's when the universe talks to each other and it all comes together.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, even just like it's on, people who are, younger, or, just even friends, they started to ask about old movies. There's a lot of stuff in the older movies that, we don't do anymore for good reason, and that I personally don't want to see, and I'm glad we don't. Some of the stuff, I brought up Stagecoach a bunch.
Yeah.
I think it's a great movie. I love it, but I'm very thankful we don't do stuff like the way they did it back then. And I think it's just part of it. It makes you, it doesn't mean that the movie should never be watched or, whatever, but it's a part of it. But it's also, that means that when you see something like Mask of Zorro, where you guys so obviously cared about the horses, it's like, you want to know that, that you're, when you're going to a restaurant, that like stuff was ethically made and locally produced, like the big organic movement and everything. It's like, I'd rather know my broccoli comes from like, a place that is organic, and they're not like just spraying it 20,000 times with pesticides, right? So I kind of think about it in that same way. It's like, it doesn't mean I'm not going to eat broccoli if I go out to a place and I don't know, but like, I'm much happier when I know that, that they treat horses like you guys. So
Yeah. Well, that's where the whole, no animals were harmed, in this movie. The reason for that being, obviously comes from the not so pretty past. All animals, all children. The American Humane is the second one on set that can take charge of a minor on set. It's a student, it's the teacher first, and then there's the American Humane. They also watch out for minors. So it's very much the same thing. You're watching out for people who may not be able to speak for themselves. And that's why when it's funny, I keep saying this, but it's true. When they ask me, what are they capable of? And I say, well, it's like a little child that's not being paid. I know I keep reiterating that but the whole crew can associate that. Even if they don't have any old child, they know one. So they can all kind of like frame the way they need to approach it, the way they need to manage their equipment, the way they need to ask permission first. And you wouldn't walk up and just do something to an 8-year-old child without asking them. You just wouldn't.
Yeah.
And just because you have a horse doesn't mean you should be messing with one on set, because he's at work right now. I'm happy to let you pet it off set and when we're not working, but right now he's got a job to do, and we're all doing the same job. And to stay safe, we have to stay focused. So that's the beauty of it, though. Once you give people a frame to kind of understand, and I found that's the quickest way to do it. I don't say they're a spooky animal, or they go, aren't horses used to gunfire? I go, of course. But the first gunfire always gets your attention, just as it would if I just walked into a restaurant and shot the gun off. Everyone's heard a bullet. Everyone's heard a gun, but it would still make everyone jump. So it's funny they don't. And also, we use quarter loads in movies because horses hear 4 times better than us. And so, like on John Wick, the electric motorcycles we used were actually harder to use than the regular motorcycle, because they made such a high whirling sound. So the horses took more time to get used to them, because it was just a weird noise. Not that it hurt them, but just it was a weird noise. So these are some of the little things about in the movie business not everybody knows about horses. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
But,
fascinating. Well, if you want to learn more stuff like this, you can go to atadwest.com. That's atadwest.com, and you can sign up for classes, seminars, and please do, so that we have more people in the stunt business, more people in the trick riding business, and so that we get to see more movies like this. And I hope I will be the first in line when hopefully Gatlin gets to do the sequel to Zorro. So
I'll send you his contact information. You guys will have a great conversation. It'd be great for him to visit with you. I'm sure he would love to hear all about the history of the westerns and stuff like that you like.
I'd love to.
Yeah,
absolutely.
He graduated UCLA in English and a minor in film, so he's really, really. I'm so happy that he's pursuing that, and he's dragging his brothers with him. He always writes them the best parts.
Okay. That's a good. Yeah, is he the oldest?
He is the oldest.
Yeah, that's a good older brother.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah,
well,
it's
cool.
cool.
Well, thank you so
guys.
much, and I appreciate it, and have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.